Hi there. Long time no see. Good evening, morning, afternoon, B's, G's, NB's, P's, Vagines, and in betweens. I come to you as always as Charles, otherwise known as CeePo. Welcome to this uh, Patreon fulfilled video, which I'm trying to get them all out of the way before the holidays, which is, this is still pretty late. But a producer on my channel suggested this video because over the course of the year, there's been a lot of Star Wars discussions, not even just recent stuff, not even like things from Disney Plus, Acolyte. Was there other things this year? Anyway, things like Last Jedi came up, uh, and a bunch of popular Star Wars internet, YouTube, social media arguments came up, and I guess for that reason is why this video was suggested to me. It is recently released, and I'll tell you something got my attention is the amount of views on this by Honeycut Videos. Uh, it would already be like a top 5 performer on my channel, which isn't that hard to do. But yeah, it's only been up for a week. I'm going to be reacting to it and discussing it and pausing along the way. Please bear in mind if you have something in the chat that isn't exactly relevant to what's happening at the moment. I may not answer it right away, but we'll get to certain points if the chat brings it up. And and sad to say, money talks. As the reason why we're here, I was bribed into covering this. So again, Honeycut Videos. The link is in the description. Mr. Excuse me, Red Letter Media. See, I'm jumping the gun. Red Letter Media and the Star Wars prequels. We're learning this together. Let me make sure I get all this stuff in the way. All right, an hour and 16 minutes. I shudder to think how long this will take.
Worried are you that the critics are not going to like this new movie?
Oh, I'm not worried at all. They haven't liked any of them, really. And they especially haven't liked the last two. So.
Well,
So this is prior to the third film in the prequel trilogy? Yeah.
exactly.
Hey, I mean, it can't get any worse.
Yeah, but come on. I mean, when they go after your writing, your directing, it has to hurt.
Oh, it always hurts.
It has to hurt.
It hurts a great deal. But part of making movies is you get
Oh, that's in the video.
attacked, and sometimes in very personal ways.
Over the past decade or so, I've observed a change in the Star Wars fandom's attitude toward the prequel trilogy. The so-called fandom menace that dominated the discourse about the films has been made to give way to the more positive appraisals by newer generations who grew up with the films and always liked them, and are now old enough to make their own online presence and videos about what they saw in the films, alongside older fans who have reevaluated them after seeing what the Star Wars film series became without the leadership of George Lucas.
So I don't think that's entirely true. I feel like each generation following the original trilogy has a bit of younger brother syndrome because, to put it quite bluntly, neither the prequels or the sequels have matched anything that the original trilogy did as far as buzz, hype, reaction, appreciation. It was this cultural event. And as much as I remember the prequel trilogy having the hype and the buzz, the success and quality of the films didn't match what all the hubbub was about. And far more so with the sequel trilogy, you had all of that for the first film, The Force Awakens, and it did quite well. But thanks to the internet and something that is in the age of YouTube videos and video essays, the voices that did not like it got louder and multiplied very quickly. And it was far more believable that people involved with the film could have heard displeasure with the most recent 9 years of Star Wars content than any series before it. And I feel like the internet, for as incredible as it is and can be at times, it also is a megaphone for things that maybe don't uh, mirror what most people are feeling. It just seems like the loudest voices get the most precedent, um, especially when it comes to artistic feedback. So there's a bunch of advantages and disadvantages. And like he said, I think the fact that the the kids of the prequel trilogy are now old enough to make their own content and discuss it is probably why it feels like there's more of this coming around to things. And I don't know if that would be accurate either. If you're in an echo chamber where you're scorned by the sequel trilogy because, growing up, you tried to talk about your favorite movies with kids or older kids, and most of them complained about how disappointed they were, there might be a bit of finally I get to backlash against something else, but we got a long way to go.
So far, this cultural shift has been a gradual process because for a full decade following the release of Revenge of the Sith, the popular consensus was that what was wrong with the films was pretty much everything. The flaws of the Star Wars prequel trilogy were, and still are, believed by many to be so great in number that the films ostensibly fail on every level of filmmaking.
So this is how liberty dies. With thunderous applause.
And from what I've observed, the echoes of the voices that make such accusations remain present even through the more recent reevaluations, taking the form of backhanded compliments like, well, the dialogue may have been atrocious, but the world building was great, or George Lucas may have had some wacky ideas, but at least he had a vision, stuff like that. The problem I have with this is not that I'm displeased that people are coming around on the films. The reason I raise my eyebrow at these kind of attitudes I see toward the films is because of the history of how these criticisms, and others like them, have been expressed. Tracing back through the history of the prequel backlash, nearly all of them come from the mind of one crotchety old man who's obsessed with pizza rolls.
I don't know if it all traces back to the red letter media stuff, but the thing that I would say a lot of people who are on YouTube, who talk about, who cover, who review movies today, you've learned that there was a way to be entertaining while discussing movies. And if you take away the film criticism in the Plinkett reviews, there is comedy there. It's doing a hell of a lot more than just showing you film critique. So I think whether or not that's true, for the most part, those reviews opened a lot of people's eyes to perhaps roasting films while talking about what you did or did not like. There's something to be said for the success of those reviews.
Hi everyone, it's me, Mr. Plinkett.
Red Letter Media is a YouTube channel created and run by Mike Stoklasa, Jay Bauman, and Rich Evans. In 2009, they rose to internet notoriety with Stoklasa's review of The Phantom Menace. Its 70-minute runtime was eye-watering by the standards of early YouTube, which at the time limited video length to only 10. The review became an astounding success for them, amassing
Wait, what does eye-watering mean? That could mean a couple of things.
millions of views and getting shared around like crazy. This review has become regarded by some as the gold standard for online film criticism. I've seen it referenced hundreds of times in other videos about Star Wars, and even in cases where another YouTuber mentioning it concedes that they might disagree with some of the points they made in it, they must always defer to its supposed brilliance.
Supposed Brent, it's like when I talk about or hear about Citizen Kane, first thing I had to watch, and I say had to watch in film school, but after a while of learning more about movies, while it's not my favorite film, if you compare things that were out at that time and just how much it just made Citizen Kane, it did so much for filmmaking. As much as I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite movies, I I can understand and appreciate that it it's praised for a reason. So I don't know if I think I understand where this angle is now.
Part of this reputation comes from its unique presentation. Mike Stoklasa plays an original character named Mr. Plinkett, a serial killer with a nasally voice who has a bad habit of straying wildly off topic when he discusses the film at hand. Stoklasa had decided upon presenting his review in this style because, by his own admission, he didn't have confidence in his ability to hold a viewer.
Hold on. I did Jake. Oh, why is that? Hmm. Oh, okay. So Jacob says, my favorite thing is people pretending that Citizen Kane is bad to be contrarian. For the record, I'm not trying to be. I'm not trying to say that Citizen Kane is bad. I understand how brilliant it is. It's just something that, it's not something that I would go to immediately. I'm sure 95% of the movies that I enjoy have something that they can attribute to Citizen Kane or the boundaries that Citizen Kane broke. But again, the film itself isn't something that I would run to and say, this is what we must watch. Okay, I see. Yeah. So Jacob says that you're not talking about me. Yeah. You can not agree with the discussions or topics in the Plinkett video, but to disregard what it means for modern film YouTube content is, I don't know if that's being entirely fair, but we still have a while to go.
Attention without such a gimmick. This is the first inkling into his approach to film criticism that I found noteworthy, but it won't be the last. Despite his commitment to the character, I'm gonna pretty much exclusively refer to Mike Stoklasa in this video. Despite the exaggerated mannerisms and speaking style of the Plinkett character, he's just a mouthpiece for Stoklasa's actual opinions. And even when I refer to Red Letter Media, or RLM for short, within the context of this video, Stoklasa and RLM are the same entity. Mike created the company and the channel, and while their videos feature other people, these other people are his friends, and in relation to my focus in this video, these other people share his opinions about Star Wars. I went back and forth for quite a while, years actually, on whether or not to make a project like this, and even now I think I'm kind of taking a risk in making and publishing this video, because again, this is one of the most popular online movie reviews ever made, and it's not like they're a recent phenomenon either. These guys have been around for years and have a pretty beloved reputation. Unfortunately, most of the statements made in this video are wrong.
Okay. I now see where we're headed with this. Art is subjective. I really hope that the O word doesn't get brought up here. Your opinion is that to say that someone's opinion or video is wrong that's bold, but it could be the angle that this video is taking. But I'm already guarded. To say that someone's criticism is wrong is it could be in jest. You know what? We're covering the Plinkett universe, so we'll cut some slack.
They're factually wrong or spiritually wrong. These two types of wrongness are symbiotically linked, as I will attempt to communicate throughout this video. I doubt the actual criticism Stoklasa makes in his 70-minute Phantom Menace review would actually convince anyone who is neutral on the film to hate it.
I don't think criticism is meant to sway someone to hate or love something. It's supposed to be criticism to give you your perspective. And as was recognized, their perspective is an exaggerated fictional version of what Stoklasa feels about the movie. Well, we got still plenty of time here, so I'm dying to know where we go with this. But your opinion is wrong and factually wrong. It takes a lot.
I hypothesized that the reason it became so successful is because people who already didn't like the movie were charmed by the gimmicks of Stoklass's style and the then unheard of runtime. And I think they took his criticism.
It's also got some comedic elements. Again, it's still entertaining. I've seen edits of this where they cut out the Plinkett, like the bit where he has the woman in his basement. That's comedy. That's supposed to give you the idea that this person isn't level-headed. So even if you have an issue with the viewpoint in the review, you know, ironically, you're supposed to be like, oh, why should I care what this person thinks? They're an atrocious human being. And I don't know, that troubles me.
Criticisms as gospel because they believed his thinking was as sound as the review was entertaining. And I think they became emboldened by the video's notoriety to continue propagating his criticisms without thinking critically enough about whether or not his thinking was actually sound. I haven't seen nearly enough response to these reviews that directly challenges them on their actual merits as film criticism. There was this one guy using the pen name Jim Raynor who wrote a 108-page response to Stoklass's review, but Stoklassa himself then just mocked it in an ad for another project of his. You know, in media studies, this is called recuperation. There are some other works that have spoken out against RLM, but it's usually a secondary function to these works' respective main purposes. A guy named Brian Young did publish a multi-part rebuttal that was similarly detailed to Raynor's, though in a more editorial approach and with cleaner language.
Why is the need to provide a rebuttal necessary is my question. Yes, Jacob, you're right. Art is subjective to a point. If someone said, in my opinion, Vader didn't cut off Luke's hand, that someone would be wrong. Right. Okay. Fair enough. But interpretation on whether or not a film is good or bad, objective things that happen in the movie, yes, are objective. In some cases, there's some ambiguity, but for the most part, when it comes to criticism, it's subjective. What's going on, Christian? When people turn subjective opinions into objectivity, yeah. I don't know what rebuttal would.
Unfortunately, as far as I know, this response is unfinished. He titled each post part blank of 7, but never actually published part 7, at least not that I can find. I don't know why, maybe he just lost interest. He did mention the comments and messages he'd received from RLM fans, and as you can likely imagine, fans of this review that has a whole subplot about kidnapping and torturing a sex worker are very cool and normal people. So it may be
All right. All right. Humor.
that he didn't feel inclined to complete this response because of that. What I'm getting to is, I've felt compelled to communicate my thoughts about this review for a while, but I was disinterested in doing a point-by-point rebuttal. For one, that's just not how I roll in my writing, and also, the problems I have with this review form a through line from factual inaccuracies about the story, all the way up to how they speak about George Lucas as an artist. But just as I said that I don't think RLM actually convinced anyone who didn't already hate the film to hate it, I don't expect my statements to convince anyone who hates the film to love it. Rather,
Well, I don't understand why is there a thesis to convince someone of loving it or hating it? You could present why you feel a way. There's this modern day, I don't know, debate culture where like things are presented like you have to win an argument, and I would say that is exactly what. Well, I guess that's the point. I would say this is exactly against what the original Plinkett videos were. They were presenting you a bit of a cockeyed review from someone who wasn't exactly the most stable person. And to bring up point by point why it's wrong, I'm intrigued, but I have skepticism.
I'm speaking more to people who are mixed on the film and or those who have seen Stoklass's review but may now be reconsidering its value. I want to verbalize the understandings I've developed about the film and why these reviews shouldn't have ever been celebrated. My goal for this project is not just to take Stoklasa to task for what he says, but more to communicate the deeper, more spiritual deficiencies in the negative view that he and his fan base has for the Star Wars prequels.
We live in a world now of sound bites and literary commerce in terms of the journalistic community, selling newspapers, selling books. And they do that simply by trashing things. They don't criticize them or they don't analyze them. They simply trash them for the sake of a headline or something that they can use to shock people to get them to.
I sure hope he covers the things that is brought up in the Plinkett video, especially in Phantom Menace, the issues with the technical aspects of the film, because it's certainly not sound bites.
Buy whatever it is they're selling. And you have to learn not to take that seriously. And the older you get, the less serious you take it.
The notoriety that Stoklasa's reviews have cultivated poisons a lot of the discussion around these films, especially when you want to read or have conversations about what George Lucas was actually doing with the films. Because at almost any corner of the web you turn to, you run a very high risk of encountering someone who thinks that just saying, as Plinkett said, Phantom Menace doesn't even have a main character, proves their point. Especially because the actual support Stoklasa provides for his arguments is clearly and openly biased. The claim that Phantom Menace doesn't have a protagonist as clear-cut as there usually is in 3-act films that follows the hero's journey is a fine claim to make. In fact, I agree with it. But that's just a neutral statement. Framing this as a criticism by default doesn't actually speak to anything about the film itself, it only speaks to your own taste. Not all films follow the hero's journey, not even all science fiction films or adventure films do. It's not a requirement of the genre, it's a preference for people with certain tastes.
To have a protagonist? Interesting take.
In terms of screen time and allocation of the actions that progress the story, the main cast of Phantom Menace is more of an ensemble.
I love this series of shots where one side of Anakin is facing Padme, the queen, and on the other side is Sheev, who will become Chancellor. Okay.
But The Phantom Menace also did not invent the concept of an ensemble cast, and this criticism for its lack of a main character falls apart once you try to apply it to any other ensemble film.
Please provide comparisons.
I want you to tell me who the main character of The Phantom Menace was.
But as you watch the movie, I challenge you to figure out who the main character of this movie is. You can't. Who's the main character of this movie?
Even so, Lucas explains on the commentary track that The Phantom Menace does follow Queen Amidala's story from the points of view of the two Jedi. The emphasis on this perspective is made to reflect seeing the story of A New Hope from the droid's point of view.
This movie is told primarily from the Jedi's point of view, but the story that's being told is essentially the story of Queen Amidala and her plight of having her planet blockaded, as in, say, Episode 4, where the story is told through the eyes of the droids.
I think part of the issue with having an ensemble cast is they're not fleshed out characters. A better question to be in Phantom Menace, who has a proper arc, is a better question if you want to bring up ensembles and how they're a thing. They are a thing, sure, and people can do it quite well. I think that was it wasn't Boogie Nights, it was the other one, Magnolia. Those films are pretty hardy with character development, and I would argue there's a couple of well-established and paid-off arcs. To just say that, yeah, other movies do it too, is silly without explaining, or at least covering, why the other movies work versus The Phantom Menace. If you're gonna tit for tat with that, I mean, you could say the same thing about positive feedback for a movie influencing something. Modern day Star Wars in the last since the sequels came out have been requoted by some of the bigger 4 or 5 YouTubers, easy for you to say, YouTubers who just constantly bring up Star Wars as a negative. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone just recycle a talking point without explaining to me why that's a thing. Why is it that way? Not just, oh, this person who has a lot of views and a lot of subscribers said so. I agree that someone quoting the Plinkett video, that's not a great argument, but also you should be able to speak about your feelings rather than have a debate about what is right or wrong about your argument. And if you're going to be that emotional about an opinion on a movie, establish what your feelings are so that you're able to speak of them, is a slight suggestion. Um, Christian says this may be a straw man argument, but how is Cinema Sins any different when it comes to bashing for the sake of bashing? I think both Red Letter and Cinema Sins have a unique style of comedy. I agree with that. But I do agree with this video's premise that people use arguments, issues, nitpicks presented in these videos as their own argument. And what I would say is understand how you feel that way and, define it in your own terms. You could say, hey, I didn't think of this that way. But, if you're going to be arguing for or against a film with such high emotion, figure out what your emotion is in that, and describe how it is you feel that way, not just, oh, this person said that and they're right. Okay. What is your vibe on the whole thing?
And this one is told through the eyes of the Jedi. The central story is ultimately the Queen's dilemma and the Queen's problem of the threat to her planet and her people, and how is she going to save them.
I've seen some defenses of the film point to Qui-Gon as the main protagonist, and while I personally maintain a deference to Lucas's explanation, the value Star Wars plays
Irony. There's irony right now.
On the importance of point of view compels me to concede to the validity of this reading. Brian Young believes this and also supports his interpretation by pointing to a similar sharing of protagonist duties in episode 4 and 5. Each of the protagonists add their dilemmas together to create a whole picture of the story. It's the same thing with a lot of war movies. Take Richard Attenborough's A Bridge Too Far as an example. There isn't any one consistent protagonist, but a dozen of them reaching for the same final goal, though all of their motivations are different. Though the Nazis are barely characters in that film, they are much like the Sith in Phantom Menace. We don't need the extra exposition to be told that the Nazis winning are a bad thing, and the same is true for the Sith in the Phantom Menace. But of course, this can't apply to Phantom Menace because the characters in this film are boring, right? This is the other point Stoklasa makes regarding the supposed weakness of the film's characters. He does an exercise with some people by asking them to describe characters from both A New Hope and Phantom Menace, with the restrictions that they can't describe their appearance, profession, or job in the movie. If they can't adhere to those rules when describing the character, they're not a strong character. So, for example, you can't describe Han Solo by just saying he's attractive.
Han Solo is totally dashing, completely sexy.
As you can likely predict, the people interviewed appear to struggle to describe any character traits about Qui-Gon or Padme. Simple, right? Character's bad.
So that's a little unfair to how that sequence is. There's a moment in that video where the people who are his friends, he said that, the people in the Plinkett video answering the question about characters, it's ironically done for the sake of satire. And even one of them, which is left in the video, he says, I see what you're doing here. This is very funny. So another issue with not properly understanding that this is far more than just a criticism. It's something of a criticism with a roast on top. So it's not the most fair interpretation, is what I would say.
Now let's talk about the ways one can run the risk of asserting their own biases into their grounds for their arguments. Stoklasa's sample is 5 people, 5 of his friends specifically, and to let Sheev talk about this as well.
This example is entirely anecdotal and does nothing to establish if there actually are enough traits in any of the characters to draw from. Especially considering, like I said, the people being asked are all friends of Mike, some of whom are main members of the channel even to this day, who are clearly biased toward giving their friend the answers he wants, and biased against the prequels because they don't like these movies. I think what would have worked a lot better, and this would still have been anecdotal at best, but at least it would have given us something to work with, is if he'd gone around asking people who were actually fans of these movies.
So, do we not understand the fictional twist on this thing? Like, Mr. Plinkett isn't a real person. Mr. Plinkett didn't actually interview people. Recognizing that things are exaggerated and done for comedic effect in some regard, but to be so harsh against other satirical effects is, again, I don't know what word I want to use, but it's a little disingenuous to me. And to be so tied up on defending something is I don't know. I don't know why there's this need to disprove things. If you feel a certain way about a movie, cool. Why do I we got a lot to go.
To claim The Phantom Menace was really good. If they couldn't meet the parameters of this challenge, then that might just be indicative of the point Plinkett's trying to make.
Now me personally, I'll acknowledge that the possibility exists that all 5 of these people are each truly just unable to recall any meaningful insights about these characters, regardless of their involvement in the video. But that still doesn't mean no one else is. My original idea, as I...
This is the point where you would take that test and prove it wrong. Tell us how those characters, how would you describe those characters without using visual features? Like, that's the easiest way to disprove it, no?
started writing notes for this project was to counter Stoklass's point by describing Qui-Gon and Padme using his criteria. But since Sheev Talks and Brian Young already go on to do the same in their responses, I'm going to sidestep that and instead embrace reducing them to archetypes and evaluating their value on those terms.
He's an older, stern Jedi who is really stern.
Han Solo is a scoundrel with a heart of gold. Qui-Gon Jinn is a maverick sage. These are both archetypes. C-3PO is a comedy sidekick, Jar Jar is also a comedy sidekick, Panaka is a cranky servant. These are also archetypes.
I didn't know his name. To use archetypes, when you watch a movie, if you're not studied on some of these terms, you're not going to think of archetypes. You're going to think, oh, guy with a heart of gold and other silly things. This is a little, what is it, straw man? Is it the opposite? Steel man? This is a little silly. I don't know. Enoch says archetype is a fancy word for trope. And trope is the fancy word for cliche. Yeah, sure. George Lucas world building, great, can't write a script. Well, maybe he's going to disprove that too. I feel, I don't know. Show me on the Jar Jar where the Plinkett video hurt you.
What is actually interesting and worth devoting your critical eye to is what the movies do with them. The characters of Phantom Menace aren't very complex. Stoklasa makes note of this, but he neglects the fact that so are the characters of A New Hope. Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford also described their characters as being very simplistic and lacking in more granular character traits. In J.W. Rinsler's Making of Empire Strikes Back, he quotes them saying, "Leia is not a real character. She is more of a caricature and is somewhat one-dimensional. It's not really possible to write out a list of Princess Leia's likes and dislikes. I do know her favorite color."
Now, Jacob says, I don't know. It's a joke, dude. It's a little disingenuous. If you make a video interviewing your friends in order to make a point about characterizations in film, you're clearly making a point. I said half, partially. But there is literally a line where he says, "This is funny. I see what you're doing here." Like, it's a bit of a tip of the cap, I would argue.
Though it's white, she wears white all the time. "I never knew that my character only had 2 dimensions until critics told me," Ford says. "I don't play the 3rd dimension because it wasn't the author's or director's choice to do that, but it's there. It has to be there. I don't have to play it because it's me.
Please acknowledge that that's sarcasm.
It's part of me, so the simpler I keep myself, the more it shows. This is a simple kind of enterprise, and as such, the motives of the people involved are generally pretty straightforward." In both trilogies, the characters are intentionally written to be simple archetypes because this allows the story to move along quickly, and it facilitates easily recognizable relationships. The wide-eyed youth and his wise old master, the scoundrel and the princess, and the same is true for the characters in the prequels.
You can have simple characters and have them be charismatic at the same time. You can root for and against characters. due to how those characters are filled out. Leaning on words like archetype is, I feel like I'm in school.
Sam Jackson, when asked about his character, Mace Windu, says, George never actually told me any of the qualities that Mace had.
That's a slight problem.
He never said, he's from here, he's from there, he's this, he's that. He's allowed me to totally create this character and fill him out in any way I've seen fit. I guess he trusts what I bring to this character. If I'm doing something wrong, I'm sure he would tell me, but generally he has allowed me to totally create this guy.
So the guy who created this brilliant universe and is telling you everything there is to know about the universe that he created can't really tell you about one of the characters that's in his movie?
Sam Jackson is actually a bad motherfucker like Windu, or that Carrie Fisher is a witty spitfire like Leia, are fun observations in isolation, of course.
I'm sorry, Sam Jackson's a bad motherfucker in the prequels? I need to experience the prequels the way this person has, because they totally went against everything that Sam Jackson, the actor, was popular for in the Star Wars movies. I'm kind of confused.
But they're also emblematic of a pattern George has in his casting. He casts actors who are already similar in personality and aura to the characters he writes, and then
I want long notes and descriptions and examples of how Samuel L. Jackson is similar to the Mace Windu character, because I need to be convinced of that. That's something fresh to me.
steps back and gives them the freedom to act how they feel is right for the part.
I was looking for somebody who was very boyish and young, but had sort of a James Dean, sullen.
No, Sam Jackson didn't chop off a dude's head. That was. Oh, was it Sam? I was thinking of somebody else. Yeah. Did he say no? That's the second one. All right, so I'm confused. Yes, he did do that, but that makes him a badass? Just chopping someone's head off? He didn't do typical Samuel L. Jackson, say what again type stuff.
Edge to him.
But we also shouldn't trust Oklasa to be a fair arbiter of what is and is not good storytelling, because he applies this bewildered attitude toward every scene in the film. He claims he could tell something was very wrong by the fact that the first scene is a pilot parking their shuttle in a ship that's shaped like a circle.
It opens with some boring pilot asking for permission to land on a ship that looks like a half-eaten donut with a donut hole in the middle. What the fuck is that? Then two cloaked figures walk into a room in a completely flat angle.
He spends an entire section complaining that the film doesn't delve into every minute detail of the trade dispute.
So the Trade Federation have set up a blockade around Naboo in order to stop them from getting space supplies.
Wait. So the comment about the donut is because it looks like a donut. I don't know if, like, humorous lines, there's a little too much weight being provided to this.
I don't get it. Why would an organization called the Trade Federation want to blockade trade?
Right, so this commerce franchise uses interstellar routes to do their business. The Republic says they'll have to pay taxes for using certain routes, and they don't like that. Palpatine is using this as an opportunity to get the Federation to do something illegal. This will create a situation that...
This is the opening scene of the movie. What about trade routes is Star Wars-y? Notice how Valorum collapses into his seat as though he's had the wind knocked out of him. That's not the first thing you see.
Will make the current chancellor look weak and ineffective so that he can become elected the new chancellor. So he tells them to place the planet under siege. And see, the Trade Federation goes along with this because greed can be a powerful ally.
This isn't the first scene.
Stoklasa doesn't understand how Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan plan to warn the Queen of the invasion when they don't have a transport to get to the palace. He also doesn't understand why they ask Jar Jar to take them to a nearby city where they could acquire a transport to get to the palace. Mr. Spock would be astonished by his airtight logic.
How is a
What?
totally isolated city underwater affected at all by the Naboo being attacked by droids on the complete other side of the planet?
Once those droids take control of the surface, they will take control of you.
My troops are in position to begin searching the swamps for these rumored underwater villages. They will not stay hidden for long.
And you know, I could keep going on like this throughout the whole review, but the problem is I'd really prefer not to. The fundamental contradiction at the center of his whole process is that he nitpicks on such a granular level. It makes him sound thorough because he goes through every scene, sometimes line by line, but he so consistently misses the point of what's happening in scenes that it renders the totality of his criticism so devoid of value. It's really difficult not to just infer that what he's actually displeased by most is that Lucas didn't make a much simpler, dumber movie than the one he actually made.
So none of the satire is received as such, and knowing what someone feels, even though they're a created character, is the perspective we're doing this from. I don't know, having the description of the opening scene in the movie while using things that happen later in the movie, we don't have that information as we're watching that. So, and it's not one of those movies where the reveal at the end is what pays off for the beginning. So that much information in the beginning, like in the opening scene, is a bit of an issue. And film is visual storytelling, something that I sure hope he brings up. The elements of the opening shot in A New Hope is you get everything you need to know from that opening shot, not even scene, sequence. I'm pretty sure it's described in the review about the low angle and the big ship chasing the little ship. I'm pretty sure that's there.
For example, he takes particular umbrage with Qui-Gon's actions throughout the movie. He rambles for quite a while about all the supposed flaws he finds in Qui-Gon's choices during the tattoo.
So having issue with nitpicking to an incessant amount, are we going to discuss? That's what modern YouTube, especially long form movie review stuff, is kind of become, is this long form questioning the common sense, and why would an army do this, and I don't know if
section, none of which are actually flaws, of course, but he says that Qui-Gon seems to have very questionable values and take certain actions that he'd consider morally wrong. And then he says that when he was trying to get a new hyperdrive, he should have just force-choked Watto while Padme steals it. You really can't make this up. It's remarkable.
Well, because his character is already morally flawed. So if you're going to be morally flawed, why not just take the extra step?
Choke Watto while Padme grabs the part and they run out of the shop.
Plus the fact that the person who's giving this opinion is someone who's got a sex worker locked in his basement. Again, understanding the character would help what's happening in the thesis at the very least.
And the funny thing is, he criticizes Qui-Gon's character to such an extent that he ends up invalidating his earlier point about Qui-Gon being a boring character with no discernible personality traits. His friends had described Han Solo as dashing, cocky, a thief with a heart of gold, and of course they themselves had no terms to ascribe to Qui-Gon, but Stoklasa himself describes Qui-Gon as
a drunk. He has very questionable moral values. Qui-Gon Jinn is incredibly stupid.
I may not agree with such a description, but that is about on par with what they came up with for Han.
So Han's stupid?
So it's not that Stoklasa hates Qui-Gon for not being an engaging character. Stoklasa was so engaged by Qui-Gon that he jokingly theorizes that Qui-Gon is secretly the titular Phantom Menace. The real reason he hates Qui-Gon is, well, he says it himself.
Then the older, wiser Jedi is the opposite of what he should be.
That's the problem he has. Qui-Gon isn't the archetype that Stoklasa would prefer. But the reason why he's designed this way is for a specific...
But that's something that it's either his or Plinkett's position, is he feels a way because it's not what he would prefer. that is an incredibly personal position, and I respect that. And I agree that other people adopting this position as their own without putting their feelings onto it it's unfortunate. I certainly won't dispute that, but at least he's giving you his position on why he feels a certain way.
Purpose. These archetypal characters are designed to lend themselves well to certain dramatically interesting pairings, and that's what Qui-Gon's relationship with Obi-Wan is for, and the two characters are designed to contrast each other.
I'm sorry for my behavior, Master. It's not my place to disagree with you about the boy.
I've disappointed you. I haven't been very appreciative of your training. I've been arrogant, and I apologize.
And I am grateful you think I'm ready to take the trials. You are strong and wise, Anakin, and I am very proud of you.
You've been a good apprentice, Obi-Wan. And you're a much wiser man than I am.
And you have become a far greater Jedi than I could ever hope to be.
I foresee you will become a great Jedi Knight.
Qui-Gon is willing to make risky decisions. Obi-Wan is a more conservative pragmatist. Qui-Gon defies the Council and isn't a Council member. Obi-Wan adheres to the Council and later becomes a member. Qui-Gon sees the value in lower life forms like Jar Jar and Anakin. Obi-Wan questions why they're joining them. Obi-Wan continually questions Qui-Gon's reckless nature, and Qui-Gon in turn becomes impatient with his students' insubordination. It's an interesting tension because Obi-Wan's arc resolves with him placing his faith in his master and respecting his leadership, and in turn adopts some of Qui-Gon's independent nature by the end, saying Anakin will become a Jedi whether or not the Council supports it. Visually, the way Obi-Wan's and Qui-Gon's characters are contrasted reaches a culminating point in how they behave when they're separated from Maul by the ray shield doors. Qui-Gon meditates patiently, maintaining his focus on the living force, while Obi-Wan remains on his feet, impatient for the duel to continue. But this becomes a near-fatal problem when Maul outclasses him in combat. To achieve victory, Obi-Wan must quiet his mind and focus on the present moment, as Qui-Gon had always told him to do, and that is what makes the difference. Does Stoklasa have any observations about any of this? Of course not. That's a really funny thing about this review, and indeed all three of his prequel reviews. He gets close to crafting.
There's a section of the Revenge of the Sith review where Stoklasa actually makes some compelling comparisons between Anakin and Charles Kane, but just concludes that he doesn't like how Lucas did it. Seriously, that's it. Look, can you show that instead of summarizing? I mean, this is a very long video.
An interesting insight, but then falters because of his disinterest in actually engaging with the film on its own terms. Like,
so Revenge. Oh, does it? Yeah, the video title is the prequels. I thought we were only discussing Phantom Menace. Never mind. I was going to say why are we showing stuff from the third film? But
he recognizes that Qui-Gon makes decisions that seem questionable, and he knows that the character dynamics seem abnormal from your typical Hollywood blockbuster. But he concludes that these are just flaws in and of themselves, and writes off the whole movie because.
So that's not the prequel trilogy.
It's not the movie he wanted to see.
I'm very self-critical, and I have a lot of friends that I trust and who are film directors and writers and people in my profession. But I trust their opinion, and their opinion is thoughtful, knowledgeable, and I also know them personally, so I know the psychological slant they're putting on it. I know what their tastes are. And I can say, well, that's great for them, but that's not great for me.
Stoklasa combs through the film mostly chronologically, but aside from not understanding Qui-Gon's gamble with Watto and a few rape jokes, he basically glosses over the entire Tatooine section of the film. The pod race, Anakin being freed and saying goodbye to his mother, and the first confrontation with Darth Maul. He barely says 2 words about any of that. In fact, aside from a few glib comments about how boring he thinks Coruscant is, he barely says anything about that section of the film as well, only resuming his usual level of nitpicking at the scene where Qui-Gon explains midichlorians to Anakin. I'm not lambasting him for this. It's fine to not discuss something in a movie if it's not relevant to what you want to focus on, but I do think it's strange that this review is heralded for saying everything there is to say about this film, plus a whole bunch of stuff no one else ever thought of.
So the floor is yours. I'm assuming you're going to present a counterpoint here, because complaining that someone doesn't bring something up while disproving things, I would hope that the first thing being done here with the floor is to explain what was missing in the original review.
And says basically nothing about an approximate third of the movie. It's especially strange considering that the sequence of Anakin being freed and having to leave his mother is the focal point of not just this film, not just this trilogy, but George Lucas's entire Star Wars saga. When George Lucas wrote the prequels, he decided that Anakin's fall to the dark side would stem from his emotional attachments. To lay the foundation for this in a way that would best serve an odyssey that would start in his childhood and end with his death, he needed Anakin's separation from his mother to be a traumatic event. What would be the most narratively appropriate time in the character's life for this to occur? Lucas has described such a question as a major challenge he found when writing the film. There were a lot of things that would have been easier if Anakin had been 12. The casting would have been easier for one thing, and it would have been easier to justify things like the pod race or the way he is able to fly a starfighter at the end of the movie. But the problem was that a 12-year-old leaving his mother, as Anakin does, is not nearly as traumatic as a 9-year-old leaving his mother. And there is a key story point that revolves around the fact that he was separated from his mother at an early age and how that has affected him. So I slid the age down as far as I could. The hole that this separation leaves in Anakin's emotional development informs every subsequent point in his character arc. He seeks to fill this void where his mother should be with Padme in Attack of the Clones. Witnessing the death of his mother and regretting that he was powerless to prevent it fuels his desire to possess Padme and achieve mastery over life and death.
The issue with that is, in film, you should be able to show that. And what this guy is explaining is stuff that I don't think is presented in the cinematography or the dialogue. You could read up on something that you can read, 50 books on why this 90-minute piece of film is a certain way. But when it comes down to it, what is in the visual product itself? And I don't know, doing a lot of homework. I don't know if that presents the best argument for this.
In Revenge of the Sith. These parts of Anakin's journey ripple over into his actions in the original trilogy as Darth Vader. They add new layers of thematic meaning to his desire to possess Luke and use him to destroy the Emperor in Empire Strikes Back, just as he had once proposed to Padme. Seeing Anakin give in to his attachments by allying himself with the Emperor makes his choice to save his son at the end of Return of the Jedi all the more profound. A viewer who has seen all 6 films in chronological order understands the full meaning of Vader finally letting go of his attachments. They see that he is finally displaying the compassion, the unconditional love, that defines a Jedi's life. I believe that a person who has nothing to say about this part of the story of Star Wars does not truly understand Star Wars.
To judge what's supposed to be the first movie based on other things that happen in the franchise isn't saying very good things about the one movie. If you didn't know about the sequels, how would the prequel, how would Phantom Menace stand on its own? How would the storytelling work for you? To constantly reference other things, granted, Star Wars is about rhyming and things like that, but the movies should be able to stand on their own without references to the future or past. The references to the future or past is something of a bonus, but the story itself should be strong enough to not need the little bonuses.
And I believe that it is unacceptable for such a person to claim that it is actually George Lucas.
Jacob, that's exactly what I don't know what the difference between 9 and 12 years old. The separation, I would even say if you're 15, there's some trauma in being separated from your mother. I don't understand what 9 to 12. I don't even think you're going through puberty yet at 12. So I don't understand that at all. Don't let George write. Simple lesson.
Who does not understand Star Wars.
You see, I'm not even sure if Lucas actually understands Star Wars, or anything that happened in The Empire Strikes Back.
See, Stoklasa suffers from the mindset of believing that Star Wars is meant to be for him. And unfortunately, many people who think the way he does about the prequels also feel that Star Wars should be for them. And
that's the biggest issue with all of Star Wars fandom.
And all their problems with why these characters are written the way they are, why The Phantom Menace is so removed plot-wise from the other films, why the tone is so much lighter, why Jar Jar is the key to all of it, the ever-present motif of symbiosis. All of those problems come from this.
Fans know exactly what they want. Fans want more of the last thing they read and they liked. That's what fans want. They liked that thing you did. They would like another one of those, please.
But that isn't what George Lucas believes. What he says, what he always says, is that his Star Wars films are for everyone.
Well, it is a kid's film. You know, I mean, adults like it. It's for everybody, obviously.
And what this means is, when he set to work on making the prequels, he had a choice to make on who it was most important to make the story for. The one generation that grew up with the original trilogy and yearned to be reminded of how they felt when they first saw Star Wars when they were 12, or the children who are going to see Star Wars for the first time in 1999. And not just those children, but every child, everyone, of any age, through every generation, who at some point in their lives would have the opportunity to experience Star Wars for the first time as it was meant to be experienced.
So, kids, I could speak to this. Kids in 1999 really wanted films about trade routes and taxes and blockades. That's for everyone. I don't know adults that want that.
Guess which choice he made. Lucas had always known that some fans would be displeased by the prequels. Before the release of Phantom Menace, he knew that older adults who grew up with the original films would turn their noses up at the more child-friendly, sunny tone. He knew that fans who liked Star Wars for the badass action wouldn't like the emotionally forthright romance in Attack of the Clones. And when he was making Revenge of the Sith, he said that he was telling the part of the story that longtime fans would be most excited to see play out. Lucas has always had a strong understanding of how people would react to each Star Wars film upon release. But even so, I don't think that he could have foreseen that mature adults would be so loud, so crass in their reactions that they would spend the next decade saying he raped their childhoods.
Like, what are you trying to do? Are you actually trying to antagonize us?
People like you make me sick! What's wrong with you? And I saw some guys selling a t-shirt that actually did say George Lucas raped my childhood.
Isn't there a song, George Raped My Childhood?
George Lucas raped our childhood. George Lucas raped our childhood. George Lucas raped our childhood.
The idea of the Force, the idea of
is ruined.
No, it's how is
yes,
it ruined? What is the essential? What is the essential teachings of the Force? To live without fear.
I don't know what this stuff is proving other than Star Wars fans are the most insufferable people on the planet when it comes to fiction. I don't know if this is the right point to make, but yeah, movies are made for everyone, and fans, when it means something special to them, they hold it to a certain regard in their heart. And you could say the exact same thing about the sequels. This generation of kids have a lot, or maybe they don't have a lot to say. Maybe it's the prequel generation who have been so vocal, and obviously the original trilogy. But since the internet has been in existence, Star Wars fans have been insufferable about their complaints. The loud ones, at least.
Live without anger, right? To do good for yourself and everybody else. To be open, right?
My blood test says I can't do that.
So then George Lucas completely and utterly finally ruined Star Wars forever by having Qui-Gon explain that the Force is microscopic organisms.
No, he doesn't. He has Qui-Gon explain that microscopic organisms are the conduit through which we are connected to the Force. You know, I'd hate to be in the room when Stoklasa and Chris Stuckman and Marcus and all these guys discover that here in the real world, we also have microscopic organisms in our cells that do stuff to help us live.
But I cannot even wrap
But the original trilogy was about the feeling, about the vibe. The prequels is essentially saying, it's it's math. You have a certain level of THC in your blood. I know it's not THC, but that's the issue. It's something of a religion in the original trilogy, and In the prequel trilogy, it gets watered down to it's just math. It's something either you have or you don't. That is the issue. I would think that people have the issue with the midi-chlorian thing. It goes from the force is everywhere, use it, to your number's too low. It's not very American. You can do anything you want. It's kind of you don't have the numbers, bro.
My mind around it.
Right, so if the Force is a field of energy that is created by all living things, then that means that all living things generate the energy that makes it the Force by living. With me so far?
No.
So the way it's meant to be understood...
And Gray says, do they give us magic, though? Apparently. I'm not with him so far. I've been wondering what are midi-chlorians?
Is that all
I've been wondering, isn't that the first time he learns?
living things create and use the Force, however biologically simple or complex those beings are. Beings as complex as humans and other sapient animals, or as simple as single-celled creatures like the Wills. Now,
the Wills aren't explained in the prequel trilogy. This is what I was kind of referencing earlier. If you're going to use every piece of content that isn't in those films, it's not exactly fair. If someone just sits down to watch Phantom Menace and they've never seen any other Star Wars film, what would that experience be for them? Because they don't explain the Wills in that. So it's math versus religion is what it comes down to.
They're never mentioned directly in the films, though they are referenced in the Clone Wars.
Mistake here. The Wills aren't specifically mentioned in the Clone Wars. All right, so now it gets worse. This episode does include other entities who speak of the living force and the cosmic force, but no direct mention is made of the Wills specifically. So that's a little troubling. So in your piece of homework that we're supposed to have known, they don't specifically reference that. That's a bit of an issue.
Television show, used as a framing device for early drafts of the screenplay, and Lucas has stated several times that they were part of his earliest ideas about how the Force works. As explained by Lucas, the midichlorians provide the energy for human cells to split and create life. The Wills are single-celled animals that feed on the Force. The more of the Force there is, the better off they are, so they have a very intense symbiotic relationship. Whenever I read or hear criticisms about the midichlorians, they almost always come from a mindset of people feeling like they took away from the mystical potential that anyone could tap into the Force and develop paranormal powers like Luke Skywalker does. That all one has to do in a moment of crisis is close their eyes, take a chill pill, and the Force can facilitate their victory. It comes from an insecurity over our smallness within the totality of the universe. But this smallness is exactly what Lucas was trying to communicate as he continued to develop the midichlorians and the Wills. It is estimated that we have 100 trillion microbes in our body, and we are made up of about 90% bacteria and 10% human cells. So, who is in service to whom? But this idea that
So then why introduce your midichlorian count is high? What happened? It's a self-defeating argument.
some people are stronger with the Force than others wasn't a retcon introduced in the prequels. It was a fundamental part of the original trilogy. Why are Luke and Leia stronger with the Force than Han? Or Jabba? Or Michael Sheard? Because the Force is strong in their family. Why is the Force strong in the Skywalker family? It must be a genetically heritable quality. It makes sense that the origin point of such an affinity, then, would be cellular metabolism. This is developed further in Revenge of the Sith when Sheev explains the fable of Darth Plagueis, that he could use the Force to control the midichlorians, thereby interfering with the natural life cycle. Some fans have theorized that Plagueis and Sheev used this ability to create Anakin, and I can understand this theory. This would make Sheev effectively Anakin's father, an interesting variation on the recurring importance of fathers and sons.
I think the mystery of the Force, and it's strong with someone, you could take that simply to be, I just need to work harder or focus. To have it be reduced to a number is unfortunate. Like Jacob said earlier, it was majestic in the original movies, and it's this thing that there's not a specific number on your strength. But, you know, if you, I don't know, to go back to religion, if you pray and you know, keep going at it, and I don't know, it's like muscles. You work on it, and not you were born with a high number. That's not. There's whimsy in the Star Wars movies, and to reduce it to here's your statistic, it's not very conducive for wonderful fantasy fiction tales.
I need your help, son. If you wanted a subtitle for these movies, it could be Fathers and Sons. And while Palpatine isn't, we must assume, Anakin's natural father in this film, he's certainly a father figure for him.
Though Lucas's
That's a very good. Fourth drawer down. I'm the one going to work every day, so those microbes are getting a free ride.
explanation for how Anakin was created is that the midichlorians started the birth process in Anakin's mother. The Wills communicated the command to the midichlorians, which activated the DNA that generated the egg. That's why Anakin doesn't have a father. He was, in a bizarre and metaphorical way, touched by God, but in this case they happen to be one-celled animals.
See, this is too much. Your average film goer doesn't want to hear about DNA and like this isn't science fiction at this point. This is like heavy duty science. You take away the whimsy of the prequels. Excuse me, the whimsy of the original trilogy, and you turn it into this this science class. People aren't interested in that. It's a fantasy action adventure movie, not Science 101. I don't even think it's 101. What the? What is happening? Star Wars fans bitched and moaned about prequels implying that the Force not being accessible to everyone, and then bitched and moaned when The Last Jedi implied the Force is accessible. Dude, I'm telling you, Star Wars fans in the last 20 years or so, the vocal ones are just obnoxious. Just obnoxious.
So my reading of it then is that the Force was out of balance because the Sith were trying to use it to gain mastery over life and death. The Wills sensed this imbalance, and to correct it, they began a communication process with the midichlorians to create Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah, so your viewing of it has a lot to do with extra things that you're taking into account. If you're just judging the films in question, which is what the Red Letter Media videos were, they were discussing, especially the first one, Phantom Menace. It doesn't have all of this stuff that this defense is providing. It's a little frustrating.
Someone who would be strong enough with the Force that he could destroy the Sith, thereby restoring balance. This creates a mythology in Star Wars that spans multiple levels of existence. Life forms as simple as the Wills and the midichlorians, and as complex as humans.
I agree. Way too much homework required. On the other hand, the Star Wars dorks, the ones who complain the most above doing homework. It's their life after all. Yeah. Yeah. Cue touch grass comment.
Midichlorians did not ruin Star Wars, and they did not ruin the Force. They did not demystify the Force or make the idea of the Force smaller. They made it bigger. They made the Force something powerful enough that it redefined the mythology of the entire film series.
I disagree with that rather hardly. Again, I'll just go back to this. It went from being this faith religious thing to numbers. Literally, how high is your count, bro? You got low T.
Selfish, you get stuff.
Gray. Broom Kid had a high M count. It was willed.
You want stuff. And when you want stuff and you get stuff, then you are afraid somebody's going to take it away from you. Whether it's a person or a thing or a particular pleasure, experience.
You can't do that. You can't do that. They liked that thing you did. They would like another one of those, please.
So this video is taking issue with the Red Letter Media reviews, but constantly is bringing up references to other people's gripes with it, unless the implication is that these other gripes are referencing and using the arguments that the Plinkett video does, which is quite a feat considering the clips from Spaced that was before the Plinkett video.
George, you need to take a long fucking walk off a short fucking pier at the moment because your movies are the worst piece of shit I have ever seen.
Now, this is exaggeration. The same way I say that the internet right now is atrocious, the same thing can be said. Yeah, touch grass. Movies suck sometimes. What else is there to tell you?
There at the beginning, you don't know how good it was, how important.
Once you become afraid that somebody's going to take it away from you, or you're going to lose it, then you start to become angry.
Yeah, it's nostalgia in its simplest form. These movies mean something for a reason that cannot be reduced to a midi-chlorian count. People love these movies and they have some sort of thing behind it. This thing that really can't be explained with numbers. And it's really mostly, I would hope mostly, it's nostalgia where people, I don't know, maybe it was the first time they saw a movie with their family, or it was the first time that they went out on Halloween as one of the characters. We all don't have the reasons why it was a big deal, but it was a big deal to a lot of people. And a lot of people coincidentally had very similar feelings. And that's, I think, what I don't think people are putting so much on the movies as they're missing the feelings that they had that the movies just happen to be associated with. You know, I have a memory of this, and I remember that Star Wars was playing at the Christmas or the last time I saw a movie with my grandparents, and that's why this movie's special. That's not really a tangible thing that someone else that's watching that movie can understand or replicate, but they have their own version of that. It's not a objective thing. I've used the word objective twice now. Gray says it's a retcon whether this dude likes it or not. No. You didn't read the 5 novels that accompany those movies and the implication in an episode of the TV series that not everyone watches.
Especially if you're losing it.
Stoklasa doesn't give a lot of attention to the cinematography and camera work of the prequels in his Phantom Menace review, and I originally wanted to stay focused mostly on that review, but since he drifts way off topic at this point in his video, I think I can afford myself the freedom to do the same and—
You haven't been focused!
And at least maintain some gas by connecting this to the larger cultural context I'll talk more about later. In his Revenge of the Sith review, Stoklasa tries to present a couple examples of the boring camera work of the prequels, one of which is the scene where Anakin tells Mace Windu that Sheev is a Sith Lord.
We must move quickly if the Jedi Order is to survive.
Then they just start walking at what can't even be described as a brisk pace. Yawn. Now in comparison, let's take a look at a scene from that recent Star Trek movie.
Jim, I'm not kidding. We need to keep your heart rate down.
When Kirk realizes that they're warping into a trap.
He just can't wrap his head around why Windu would act with deliberation and care as he goes to arrest the Chancellor, rather than sprinting through the hangar bay as the cameraman has a seizure.
It's evoking emotion. A good cinematographer can have you feel what the scene is supposed to be dictating without just being stationary with a reverse. I complaining about non-complaints about cinematography while using this is comical.
How about a sudden swell of action music as they run and the camera follows behind them in a frantic pace to gather other Jedis to go confront Palpatine?
What if you have this shot muted? What about this is engaging to you? Is probably a better question to ask. If you're just watching this and you're reading the subtitles, What about it is visually appealing? It is a more simple question to ask. I don't agree with anything that's happening right now.
I don't know. Maybe Samuel was being discreet or whatever, but the other way just sounds more exciting in a movie.
It's funny because in the Phantom Menace review, he has a few points where he juxtaposes quiet, contemplative scenes from the original trilogy with action sequences from the prequels to give the spurious illusion that Lucas just kept getting distracted by mindless spectacle.
Doesn't Lucas realize that cluttering the frame up with shit is not what makes Star Wars good? It's really about moments like this. Not this. It's more about this.
I am your father.
And not this.
So it's very funny to see him then criticize Lucas for not doing exactly that. It's moments like this in his reviews where it becomes clear that his problem is not which creative decisions are being made. It's that George Lucas is the person who is making those decisions.
No, he made the decisions in the original. It's cinematography, visual storytelling to help evoke emotion. I don't think this person's understanding what the issue with the cinematography is.
Again, approved by George Lucas.
What Stoklasa misses in this comparison is that the scenes are completely different. In the Star Trek clip, okay, the Enterprise is flying right into a trap where Kirk knows the bad guys are waiting to destroy any ship the second it drops out of warp.
Sir, there's another Federation ship!
They're also emoting with their faces.
Destroy it too!
He knows that they need to stop the ship before their destination, lest they arrive at the exact spot where the bad guys have their guns pointed. I still hate how it's filmed, and I hate that it was filmed in a fucking brewery, but the need for him to run to the bridge and get there as
technically, it wasn't a brewery. It was a film set that was made to look like a jet engine. I can't even.
Soon as he can, is written into the story. Every second counts in this scene. That's why filming it in a way that communicates such chaos makes sense. But what in the galaxy would Mace Windu need to run in a similar hurry for? He doesn't need to arrest Sheev before Sheev leaves Coruscant for some unknown destination. He doesn't need to arrest Sheev before Sheev blows up a planet. He just needs to arrest Sheev soon.
How about a tight shot on his eyes, and with his eyes showing us that he has concern? That's it. That one little cutaway shot to a close-up of his eyes where he's concerned or anxious or something. It's a better way to film it.
Also, Mace was already planning to go there anyway. The very last scene he is in before this one is him and other members of the council deciding that if Sheev doesn't immediately relinquish his power after the death of Grievous.
Emotionally speaking, what are they telling you with their... All right, forget the shots. Forget the fact that it's just a camera sitting on sticks. What about what the actors are doing in the frame lets you know what the emotion is?
They would need to remove him from office and take control of the Senate directly.
We're on our way to make sure the Chancellor returns emergency power back to the Senate.
Why would he need to run around to gather other Jedi?
Yeah, great. Where in Star Wars are they running full sprint into a trap as well? Or any sense of urgency? Yeah, that's I think that's the issue, is that scene, you know, you have this Satan character who's getting ready to take over the world, and we're walking down a hallway and not really showing any sort of concern, urgency. That is an issue. You can disagree with it. You can understand and appreciate from the 15 novels and 54 episodes of a television series that help explain it, that's sufficient for you. But for people that just want visual storytelling, it's not there.
He already has other Jedi with him because he is already about to go to Sheev's office. The information Anakin tells him doesn't change Mace's plan in terms of where he is headed. It just adds a completely new layer of importance to their already existing goal of confronting Sheev. But maybe you still agree with Stoklasa. Maybe the...
I don't agree with Stoklasa. It's lazy cinematography. You fill the screen with stuff that's supposed to evoke emotion. I don't understand this, I don't know.
Camera movements and subdued acting still grate on you because they show that Lucas didn't know how to direct his actors.
There's always this good in you at this point. The good part is saying, what am I doing? And the bad part is saying, I'm doing this for Padme, I'm doing this for us, and it'll be better for the universe, it'll be better for everybody.
Again, this is stuff that is not in the movie. You can show us things that happen outside of the actual production or during the production itself, but people who are experiencing the movie and, are going off the original trilogy, that gives them so much hope and wonder. However, fairly or unfairly received, in the film itself, it's not that good, especially the cinematography.
But there's always this little part in you is saying, what am I doing?
After all, Lucas had completely forgotten how to make movies. He didn't even know when to say action or cut.
I'll say action. Sometimes I forget.
People forget.
If I forget to say action or cut, just step in and say action and cut.
That's funny. I don't know what you're trying to say here, but it's very funny.
His own team locked him out of his facilities at Skywalker Ranch.
Even I can't get past the security.
He berated members of the story group in front of everyone.
And I want you to get out of this office right now.
I'm sorry, Zed.
No way.
You brought it on yourself.
I don't want you here.
Sometimes he'd even...
That was a bit. That him yelling was a bit.
Even get into physical altercations on set.
Because you can get bopped on the head real quick.
So of course he couldn't connect with his actors at all, and that's why these adults talk to each other.
I can't tell if this is being sarcasm or not, but I don't know if that's being put across to anybody else who watches this, but I have satire notes.
They're like adults, instead of shouting. Meanwhile, the true master, J.J. Abrams, he knew how to connect with his actors and get on the same page with them about scene direction.
Well, I tell this story about J.J. in the first film. I had to run onto the deck of the ship.
Goodbye, sir. We have to stop the ship.
Kirk, how the hell did you get on board the Enterprise?
And say something to Bruce Greenwood about something.
Vulcan is not experiencing a natural disaster. It's being attacked by Romulans.
And I just had no idea what I was talking about.
That same anomaly, a lightning storm in space that we saw today, also occurred on the day of my birth, before a Romulan ship attacked the USS Kelvin. You know that, sir. I read your dissertation.
And I asked JJ, I took JJ's side, and I said, I'd love to do it one more time because I don't know what I'm saying. And if you could tell me what I'm saying, it would be great help. And he said, it doesn't matter.
I don't want to defend JJ here, but it's about the emotion. It's about the urgency. I don't think this is a great argument here.
Just run on. You say it as fast and as earnestly and urgently as possible, and no one's going to care because all the audience is going to think is something's happening. Something's happening. And that was one of the greatest pieces of advice I ever got. And just wonder why I never won an Academy Award? That could be why.
It's maybe the this acting.
Yeah, it's probably that in the...
This is even more meaningful than it seems, though. Stoklass's Phantom Menace review was promoted by both Simon Pegg, one of the actors in Abrams' Trek, and Damon Lindelof, one of the writers for Abrams' Trek. Lindelof also wrote Prometheus and Tomorrowland, so when he says, "This is astonishing filmmaking, watch all of it," you know it means something.
Be careful there. He's a writer. It's a little bit different.
It doesn't mean anything good, but it does mean something.
Quiet, I'm making my YouTube Star Wars review.
Turn around. Now.
I joined the Star Wars universe. I was asked to leave the Star Wars universe.
What I'm getting at is that this means that while J.J. Abrams was sandblasting Star Trek into a sweaty, morbid shell of its former self, he was working with people who were singing the praises of this very review. As far as I know, Abrams himself has never spoken about RLM directly, but it is very unlikely that he was wholly unaware of them. It gets even more interesting though, because after Abrams released his first Star Trek film, Stoklasa gave it a mostly positive review and even proposed Abrams as a magical cure for Star Wars.
In fact, J.J. Abrams should have directed the prequels, and George Lucas should have directed people to their seats in the theater.
And his main point of evidence for such a claim? Juxtaposing quiet, contemplative scenes from The Phantom Menace with action sequences from Star Trek to give the spurious illusion that J.J. Abrams did it right by getting distracted with mindless spectacle.
Hold on! Compensating gravitational pull
Your Highness, with your permission, we're heading for a
See, I don't know if your idea of perfect Star Wars is people in a room discussing midi-chlorians and math. That's great. But I'm almost positive it doesn't represent the already established fandom that existed prior to this. If this film, this series is for you, but only the prequels, that's great. But I don't know. It's the same way that people after Last Jedi came out, this is not my Luke Skywalker. It's the same. It's the same argument, just at a different point or perspective. I don't know. First of all, there's so much more going on here than just complaining about the Plinkett videos, but tying things back to JJ being a director of Star Trek and back to Force Awakens and ultimately Rise of Skywalker. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy where the internet wants something, they get it, and then they complain about it. The Rise of Skywalker is abysmal, but unless you're going to say you asked for it, you got it.
planet called Tatooine. It's in a system far beyond the reach of the track.
I mean, I'm no Just Stan. Wait, while I'm no Just Stan, boring is not usually how anyone describes his work. Many were bored with Lucas's prequels. Right. Yeah, if you want to make references to the original trilogy versus the prequels, exaggeration is very helpful for getting your point across, especially if you're doing so via satire. Every piece of writing is contrived to some degree. JJ Stan, thank you, Gray. And yeah, Rise of Skywalker is hands down the worst Star Wars I've seen. It's got moments where I don't know, I felt good about it, but it's a mess. That movie feels like the culmination of every person who's ever complained about Star Wars being thrown together in a movie, and I don't know who it pleases, but I would argue nobody. It is messy, and that's kind of what that movie feels like to me. Here, we've addressed everything that everyone has complained about, and we're not really making it connect at all. But here, and it's on. It's not good.
In RLM's Episode 9 review, Stoklasa qualifies this by saying that he wasn't praising Abrams' writing, only his directing. So please keep that in mind as we gaze upon clips of the sordid, sloppy, unfocused, lens flare-stricken fever trip that is Abrams' directing.
Abrams even rips off the bigger fish joke from The Phantom Menace. Laugh my ass off.
This is what Stoklasa...
He didn't say the bigger fish joke. The bigger fish joke, the visual of it, Phantom Menace isn't the first to do it. Shit, Star Wars, the original trilogy, they are homages to older films. Watch Kurosawa and then tell me how original the Star Wars trilogy is. George Lucas didn't invent visuals that were present in every movie he made.
and people who think like him were asking for Star Wars to be like as well.
My computers are better than yours.
They can dislike it all they want now, and Stoklasa can backpedal on his comments about Abrams all he wants.
This is not my fault.
But this, right here, this is what they loved. This is what they were demanding more of.
So he kind of basically is saying, you asked for it, you got it. That to not understand the visuals of Luke drinking from a teat, I think more studying needs to be done. There's more homework needed. But again, that scene isn't done for mathematic purposes. It's more you think of me as this brilliant figure, and I'm going to show you just how not that I am by drinking milk out of a teat. Do I defend that shot? No, but I understand what they were trying to say. Is it cringe? Sure. If they had done it a different way, would it have worked? Probably. But I don't think it's the worst thing in the Star Wars saga.
But not least, there's one more very large structural change that occurred in the edit, and that of course was the entire finale.
Finally, we reach the climax of the film.
Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan go back as well for no reason, and they bring the little...
He hasn't brought up any of the issues that the Plinkett video has with simple storytelling, the issues with protagonists. I mean, he brought up this segment where you can't describe the characters without discussing what they look like. But the cinematography, it was quite well thought out and presented. To just use references from Star Trek and mention that Damon Lindelof was the writer. Again, the writer. Writer doesn't have much to do with cinematography. Sometimes they do. But Damon Lindelof, I don't think is somebody you can attach to the visuals.
Little kid to a war zone for no reason.
You know, I've spent a lot of time explaining why the things Stoklasa says aren't true, but there is one...
True, I don't think that's not the best word to use.
One thing he said that I believe wholeheartedly, which is that as he wrote this lovely analysis, he only watched the movie once and paused on...
Okay, so it starts with watching the movie, of course, and extensive use of the pause button. My friend Rich will usually watch the movie with me and take notes as I shout things at him. Rich also serves as a good logic barometer. We'll talk about a scene and whether or not it made sense to both of us. With the Star Wars prequels, I think we paused almost every line because nothing made sense at all. It took maybe 5 hours to watch the whole Revenge of the Sith film, I'd say. That's kind of, it's long, man, and bad. It's kind of that to a simplest form.
Every line to complain about how he couldn't understand anything that was happening. I don't think he realizes in this interview that he's tattling on himself.
Please, God, make it stop. Make it end.
Let's see, why did Queen Amidala go back to Naboo? Well, in the last scene, she understood that the Senate would not help her with Naboo's crisis, so she decided to take matters into her own hands. And why did the Jedi go back with her?
Go with the Queen to Naboo and discover the identity of this Dark Warrior.
Because the Council said so. They directly tell Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan to go with her and figure out how the Sith factor into all this.
So that's worse. Especially considering the Amidala, they're two different people, so the Jedi told...
These aren't the kind of things you have to spend paragraphs trying to rationalize your own headcanon defense of.
Pot? Kettle?
All you have to do is just listen to the dialogue that characters are saying. It really is that easy. And the reason why it is that easy is because when Lucas was writing the story, he must have paused and asked himself, what is the reason the characters have for doing what they are now doing? And upon figuring out an answer, he then wrote an explanation into the scene. Now, as for Qui-Gon bringing Anakin along, this is the one thing that I can see someone...
You've clearly missed the part where they discuss brevity being the soul of wit. I think that was one of the Plinkett videos. The thing about movies is you don't have to explain everything. Show, don't tell. That's a big issue with the difference between the prequels and the original trilogy, even the sequel trilogy. The worst, I don't know, the worst case of tell don't show is the prequels, and that's an issue for a fun adventure.
Taking issue with. But that's also the one thing that Lucas acknowledges as an issue, and in his commentary track he says it's something the audience just needs to get past.
This was a little tricky in writing the script, and that I didn't want Anakin to become a Jedi yet, because I'm saving that for the end of the movie. But at the same time, I still had to have him tag along. And I was able to use really the device of the fact that Anakin had been put in Qui-Gon's care, and that he had promised his mother that he would take care of him, as a way of allowing them to take the boy along with him on this trek.
So he's starting from the back and trying to figure out a way that the thing that he doesn't want you to know right away, that's not writing a film for the purpose of a 3-act structure and intro conflict resolution. That's not how it works. He's working backwards, and I don't know if he did a good job of that.
To the next, third of the movie. One of the difficulties of writing a script with lots and lots of characters is you have to be able to rationalize why everybody is along. But when you got a situation like this where there isn't any mandate that they stay together, that they're there for transitory reasons that are constantly having to be renewed as the plot progresses, it becomes much more difficult to be able to get all the characters in on the act and take them along on whatever journey you're going on.
Move along.
All of a sudden, the whole blockade is gone too, and there's just one ship. Where'd they go? That's convenient.
Very convenient. The good guys can just cruise on in. Conveniently. Anyway, remember how the Trade Federation invaded the planet? And remember how they put everyone in prison camps? And do you remember when the bad guy said,
"We are in complete control of the planet now"?
Do you remember it?
Do you remember it?
So as for why the blockade ships are gone, me personally, I think they're gone because there's no longer any need for the blockade to be there. But of course, this is all just small potatoes to the real problems with the climax. Problems like the story, the characters, the pacing. As Stoklasa explains, the entire end battle is comprised of 4 different action sequences, all with different tones and levels of pathos. The entire sequence is not only the climax to the plot, but also the culmination of the theme of symbiosis. The primitive Gungans go to war with the technologically advanced droid army, Jar Jar and Anakin both stumble their way through most of their heroics but succeed, Padme's mission to apprehend the Viceroy can only happen because the Gungans draw the droid army away from the city, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, the master and apprentice, duel the Sith to divert his attention from Padme, and Anakin's fate lies in the outcome of this duel.
Am I dizzy? Didn't Lucas just say in the clip that he provided that he needs to find reason for there to be common sense?
The 4 sequences must progress in a way that feels organic, not just as individual sequences, but together as one larger climax, and the success of this must be twofold. First, the points at which we cut between each individual sequence need to feel tonally right. That is, Qui-Gon shouldn't die immediately before or after Jar Jar's Buster Keaton homage. And second, the cuts need to make sense causally. That is, Anakin needs to destroy...
Wait, how can you recognize that the Jar Jar sequence is an homage to Buster Keaton, yet complain during the Star Trek clip that's a bigger fish, which isn't exclusively a Phantom Menace thing?
Destroy the droid control ship before the Gungans can celebrate their victory on the surface. And whether or not the editing is helping to achieve these goals are the kinds of problems that a director and his team answer when reviewing the rough cut.
Seems like a lot of short scenes.
It's bold in terms of jerking people around, but I may have gone too far in a few places.
Even if the visual effects, sound mix, and music were all completed, it would still be near impossible on just the editing level alone for a sequence this complex to be perfect on the first try. But that's not what a rough cut is even for. The director and his team watches and reviews the rough cut specifically to figure out what isn't working in the film. And for the editor, Ben Burt, what wasn't working was the tonal balance.
In a space of about 90 seconds, you go from lamenting the death of, a hero to escape, to slightly comedic with Jar Jar, you know, to Anakin returning with his little kind of tag. It's a lot, and you know, it's a very short time.
So in this cut, the order of scenes in the climax went something like this, abridged for both time and...
So, fuck. There are, I can't remember which class. I mean, there have been a handful of script writing, screenplay, all of these writing tricks and tips. It might be something, I think it's in Story, where they talk about the meanwhile back at the ranch stuff. You can have it written in the script without it being prevalent in the edit. There's a lot of homework being done, and I'm like dizzy.
Copyright.
Promise me you will train the boy.
Yes, master.
Now this is pod racing.
The control ship has been destroyed. Look! They are broken.
I'm not gonna get in trouble, am I?
Notice that in the final cut, that last scene isn't even included. Instead, the film shows the victories of every other sequence before going back to Qui-Gon's death, which also has the effect of keeping that story thread more fresh in the audience's mind when Obi-Wan and Yoda discuss Anakin's future during the denouement.
We had this ending cut lots of different ways. In a lot of my movies, I end them with the intercutting of 3 or 4 different events at the same time. So it came out of American Graffiti, where I was telling 4 stories and intercutting them, and now I've developed this idea of challenging myself to see how many stories I can tell simultaneously at the end of the movie. I think I've slowed down on it a little bit, but this was very challenging in that there were, trying to get the balance right between the stories.
After the rough...
Wouldn't that be a testament to Lucas realizing that he might be perhaps bit off a bit too much and didn't achieve his goal? I don't understand what the defense or the argument is here, because the tone is all over the place. Whether or not that's saved in the edit or otherwise,
Cut screening of the movie for the first time. Everyone in attendance looks just as baffled at the clusterfuck as we were. George admits to throwing too much out there.
I may have gone too far in a few places.
Yeah?
It's honestly galling that Stoklasa viewed this truthful look at what the editing process is like and chose to describe it to millions of people as George Lucas and his team resigning themselves to the fact that the film was an unsalvageable mess. And that even as Lucas's team was describing problems with...
I think we're jumping to some conclusions there with some of this. It's quite clear that at least I hope that these movies have a very special place in this creator's heart. And there is a lot of personal emotion that I would hope is being put into this. But I still don't hear things that are not true from the Stoklasa or Plinkett perspective. It just feels like this person has perhaps way too many emotions tied to what these movies mean to them. That's fine. It goes back to what I was saying earlier, but that doesn't mean that the product that I'm experiencing, you're experiencing, someone else, someone who doesn't know anything about Star Wars sits down and watches The Phantom Menace, they're not going to have that same experience that you did. For whatever reason it is that you have those emotions associated with it. And because you've developed all of these other things and read these books and watched every piece of media that references it, and you have all of this information, and it helps your canon, which some people could say headcanon. It doesn't mean that the experience is the same for everyone, which yes, the Red Letter Media guys say it at the end of every review. That's their opinion, and if you like it, that's cool. Of course, that should be like inherent in everything.
the editing to him, he still wasn't listening.
The editor then attempts to explain pacing and why 4 scenes with totally different emotional tones don't work well together.
In a space of about 90 seconds, you go from lamenting the death of, a hero, to escape, to slightly comedic with Jar Jar, to Anakin returning when his...
But he kind of realizes he's wasting his time, so he stops.
Okay, so do we not recognize that's something of a joke?
Mike, if George wasn't listening to what Bert said, why did he decide to recut the climax to fix the exact problems Bert was describing?
But that's just my interpretation of this footage. I wasn't there.
And critics have a tendency to, that's all they focus on, which is I like it, I don't like it. It's good, it's bad. And it doesn't work that way.
Because RLM and their fans cling so tightly to this narrative that George...
It should also be noted that when RLM released this video, it wasn't seen by millions of people. I don't think that they consider themselves film critics. So that needs to be said too, that these are people who felt a specific way about the original trilogy, and they're criticizing, however silly or realistic. I would say, at least with the first one, there are a bunch of moments where, I was fresh out of film school when that video came out. There were moments that discuss why, technically speaking, it doesn't work, and against the backdrop of the original trilogy. I don't think they could have or would have called themselves film critics at that moment.
Lucas was the weak link on his own films. They've crafted other narratives to accompany it that focus on other parts of Star Wars history, such as that Marsha Lucas was the true visionary behind the scenes, that she and producer Gary Kurtz kept all of Lucas's crazy ideas in check. There's this video by Jesse Gender called The Decaying Monomyth of Star Wars that claims auteur theory is an extension of fascistic thought, which is just ridiculous on its own, of course. But a couple sections of the video have this auxiliary mini-thesis that George Lucas bought into the hero worship that his fans supposedly had for him, and that he, as she says, decayed as an artist, whatever the...
This video is biting off so many different pieces of the pie here that are we still talking about Plinkett? What do all these others... I'm dizzy enough with the homework aspect of discovering or discussing the, I don't know, the wills and all these other things that you have to read 5 other novels to understand what the intent was. I'm genuinely dizzy. He keeps lumping Red Letter Media with the most toxic Star Wars fans, as if Red Letter Media doesn't regularly take the piss out of them as well. Yeah. I'm not some Red Letter Media stan. Go watch my review of Space Cop. But I don't think this is the most fair assessment, and it's a little dizzying at times. What is your through line?
Fuck that means. And that this is why the prequels were so critically panned, and even elements of the original trilogy, like the Ewoks, were universally derided. Most of what she says about him are just paraphrased claims from Stoklass's videos, that Lucas surrounded himself with yes men, never listened to anyone, and that the prequels would have been better if Lucas had a producer like Gary Kurtz to say no to his awful ideas about his own art. There's also a section in this video where another contributor named Aronok spins this whimsical yarn about how George Lucas made the special edition so that the content of the new version would be different enough from the original theatrical cut that Marsha Lucas wouldn't receive royalties. No, seriously, she actually fucking says that.
You see, if you re-edit a film enough, if you change enough scenes, if you alter it significantly, it is considered a separate release. He was driven to push the monomyth about himself by greed, a desire for greater profits, and a fear of losing more money after the divorce.
Yeah, these people would have you believe that Lucas didn't rescan all the film elements and remake the special effects in higher quality, bring complex aerial battle shots closer to what he'd originally envisioned, completely redo the soundtrack, and film new footage to create a stronger continuity with the prequel trilogy for any sort of artistic goals. No, they'd have you believe that George Lucas,
What is happening right now? Why are we talking about the editor for the original trilogy? What the fuck?
who helped create the Film Foundation to preserve cinema history, and was only even able to remaster his Star Wars films in the first place because of his commitment to properly preserving and archiving all the film elements, they'd have you believe that he only did all that because he was, in their own words,
He was just a pissed off ex-husband who wanted to take some money away from his ex-wife.
Anyway, here's a quote from Marsha Lucas's uncut interview on Icons Unearthed.
But no, he didn't remake those movies to make money because I still have participation in those films. I do have participation in the Star Wars movies and the films we did together, like Indiana Jones and American Graffiti, and I have some participation. But no, he didn't. What can I say? It's so untrue that he would tell
Dude,
people
I have
that
no
he was
idea.
doing all this because he had to pay me, because he had to pay for his divorce.
Jesse, Aronach, Marsha's main contribution to A New Hope was editing the Death Star battle. If Lucas's goal was to erase her contributions, why did he take such great care in preserving the shot-to-shot editing of that sequence?
Why indeed? What is happening?
I don't understand.
Well,
Me too.
see, the revisions that Lucas made to that sequence were recreating certain special effects shots, but the editing itself...
Why does this
as in
matter?
The cuts from shot to shot that Marsha had made when she originally edited the sequence remained intact, down to the number of frames in each shot.
It's bad when I'm confused,
by not
'cause
changing
it doesn't
that,
take much.
Lucas is carefully preserving the artistic contributions that she made to the film. Get it?
And pushed him to make selfish, self-aggrandizing choices.
Creative,
And to erase the...
creative genius Aronach is, unlike George Lucas, a true master at camera operation and green screen compositing. Okay.
those others around him by making it about the money and not the art.
No, I guess not. Did these...
Could it be argued that this is their perspective and their belief, and that it's not objective? I used it again! Three times I've talked about objectivity.
wonderful scholars provide even a single source for where they got their information about this?
Are they scholars, though? That's part of the problem. I don't think Mike Soklasa presented something as a certified film critic. Some of the gripes is perhaps you have issue with the fact that so many people agree with this perspective and treat it as gospel. And I agree with that yes, people need to know how to use their own voice, but I don't know what the fuck that has to do with any of this, though. Jesus.
Of course not. How would they be able to? As Marsha said herself, it's so untrue. As is most of the stuff they say in this near 6-hour monstrosity.
On top of that, Ewoks, a nearly universally derided part of Return of the Jedi, was added to be able to...
And we're getting more. No, they were included to communicate the thematic idea of conflict between the primitive and the technological. The Rebels' alliance with the Ewoks also mirrors the Naboo's alliance with the Gungans in Phantom Menace. Okay, so Return of the Jedi came first, so I can't. Lucasfilm barely sold any merchandise of the Ewoks because how similar they look to the teddy bears. What, now we're talking about toy sales?
to sell Ewok merchandise for the movie.
RLM and their ilk and their fans aren't satisfied with studying the prequels by the standards of how films should be studied.
Just watch the movies! Here's a 120-minute experience. I'm going to watch the 120 minutes. Did I have a good time? No. Oh, well, you really should be reading the 17 accompanying novels and the 3 series of television series that would explain this one thing. People just want to watch movies sometimes.
They aren't even satisfied with criticizing George Lucas for not making his films how they think he should have made them. They fabricated an entire false mythology around Lucas's supposed fall from grace, a mythology that is built on a foundation of lies, both great and small.
What here? That word lies and truth again. What is the lies? The thing about the editing being redone to cut his wife out of money, which, there are guilds that prevent that. It could be a little snarky thing to say for an audience, but I certainly don't know anything about that.
These are the real flaws of the prequels, not the tiny nitpicking about things, but the major problems.
Every single frame, every single shot in the movie has a digital effect.
He uses this clip to make it sound like McCallum is arguing that the film is made better by the mere volume of digital effect.
I would say he's presenting that in a bit of a satirical effect.
He's not. He's explaining why the decision to shoot the principal photography on digital cameras made for a more cost-effective and efficient production.
Every so often you'll catch some looks of confusion and mistrust. You gotta wonder what some of these people were thinking.
Stoklasa really loves this one, where the documentary cuts to a few close-ups of people's faces during the storyboarding session.
How do you know he really loves this one?
I mean, look at how absolutely terrified they are. Even in pre-production, they knew Lucas's film would be a disaster. But one question pops into mind: what exactly is Lucas doing here? Well, kids, he's marking up the storyboards to illustrate what would be done practically and what would be done digitally. This guy reacting to Lucas's markups, that's John Knoll, the visual effects supervisor at ILM. And this guy is Jeff Olson. He supervised the building of the practical models for Phantom Menace. His job was to gather info on set to coordinate with Steve Gawley, the head of the model shop, so they could blend the physical models and miniatures with the real sets. So if you want to assume his expression here indicates nervousness, that's fine, I can certainly see that. But considering what his responsibilities were, I think it's most likely he'd have been daunted by the vast number of practical effects Lucas is revealing he'd have to accomplish. But even with the enormous...
Jeff Olson breaking the news to Lucas that he may not have needed to spend $100,000 on the real Jar Jar suit.
Workloads the artists on the prequels were assigned, the idea that they were all just relegated to yes men who never provided any of their own creativity couldn't be further from the truth. There's plenty of reading material about the making of the films that
People don't want to read shit about their fucking 120-minute experience.
Proves this. All you have to do is actually read it.
No. People don't want to do that. If they want to go watch something from their childhood or a sequel from a thing that was in their childhood and they don't appreciate it, that's it. That's all there is to it.
Reading can be fun, you know. As described in J.W. Rensler's Making of
Oh,
Revenge
for
of the
fuck's
Sith,
sake.
the artists were afforded ample freedom, to the point that their ideas actually influenced Lucas's writing process. McCallum points out that while most directors work solely with a production designer whose concept artists report back to him, Lucas prefers to work directly with the artist before attacking the script in earnest. These preliminary visuals serve as inspiration for writing more than anything else, he says, but the minute George makes a decision in the art department, I relay that information to Trisha Bigar, Gavin Buckett, and David Tattersall.
What is the topic we're complaining about again? I've literally lost everything of why this is relevant.
The level of commitment to communication is tremendous. As Lucas's writing enters a new phase, work in the art department becomes more closely tied to the emerging script, and though the artists still engage in a great deal of free-flow conceptual creation, they're also very much involved in detailing out approved concepts. By all accounts, Lucas's team enjoyed the work they had to do. The more you read through Rensler's books, the more you understand how this style of production allowed the artist to shape how the story would be told. For the first part of the design process, it seemed like George was going from what we were drawing rather than telling us what to do, Alex Yeager remembers. George was always appreciative, Ryan Church adds. We'd always try something out because you've got George Lucas's eye and not many people have that chance. But these passages are just Rensler's account of Episode 3's production.
This is something that I have an issue with. What do the kids call it? Slop? Film criticism isn't film criticism anymore. It's now a 2-hour diatribe as to why I'm going to explain to you with a 10-minute thesis as to why this one thing tells you everything you need to know without really understanding what visual storytelling is, and treating these things like a mathematical equation. It's not what the essence of the film going, filmmaking, film experiencing experience is. And I listen, I'm certainly partially jealous because if I was school aged and I could make a video thesis to like present as my homework or special credit for something, eh, right on. But it's all in the same space now. All you need is to catch the right audience, even with an idea that is sort of half baked. And that's where I guess part of the original issue is that so many people hold the Plinkett videos in such high regard because, everyone's on the same playing field. All you got to do is just find it. But this isn't discussing what works or doesn't, or disputing what was brought up in the Plinkett videos. I don't remember the last time we saw a frame from the Plinkett videos. He's claiming that Red Letter Media created a mythology around Lucas being a failure and authoritarian, which they didn't. Yes, I'm glad. Rocket science is not needed to basically say whether or not you like the movie. I agree, Adam. This is a bit much. This isn't my taste. Patreon, you you got more than you bargained for here, but yeah, this isn't something that I would get involved in like this.
And what does he know? I mean, he only documented every week of it. And what did Stoke-Lassa say again?
Now again, I must stress, I wasn't there and I can't pretend to know all the goings-on behind the scenes.
Yeah, so with these two equally valid but mutually incompatible testimonies, I just don't know who to trust.
And who are you to translate? Sorry?
So perhaps we should...
PH, exactly. Exactly. You can fully love a movie and admit it's freaking terrible. There are a bunch of movies, and going back to nostalgia, there are movies that have some sort of special thing to me. And, when I watch them as especially after film school, when I watch them as an educated adult, it's like, oh, yeah, this means something to a particular emotion for me. But as far as technically speaking is concerned, it doesn't work. I mean, I used to watch The Gate all the time, and I thought that was one of the scariest things ever. And Emily watched it for the first time a couple of years ago, and it was my first time watching it in a while. It doesn't age well. I still have those fond memories, but the movie isn't that. The movie is a completely different thing than whatever my emotion is that was tied to that experience. I agree.
To Paul Duncan and his book, The Star Wars Archives, to resolve this matter. Duncan asked members of the production specifically about how collaborative it was, and guess what? Paul Duncan, each set has its own unique atmosphere and its own set of rules about what people can and cannot do. Could people make suggestions? Rick McCallum, absolutely. It's a very collaborative set. Sometimes George listens, sometimes he doesn't, but in relationship to achieving a day's work, he always listens. When George comes in the morning, he's got 3 stock phrases. I don't know if he even thinks about them, but they are, what if we did this? Or wouldn't it be cool if we did this? Or, I was thinking, maybe it'd be great to try this out, and you have to be completely flexible. If you have a deer in the headlights look with him, you're toast, because he's looking to work out an idea. He needs to know that if I go to him and say, look, we can't do this, that I spent days thinking about it and I've exhausted all the possibilities, that I can't do it. If I just say, I can't do it, there's no relationship. At the end of the day, it's a director's medium, and he needs to know that the crew will do everything they can to help him achieve his vision. George Lucas. Most filmmakers do not have a pre-production process that goes on for 2.5 years. We would bat ideas around and it was a give and take of creative ideas. It was a lot of fun. Paul Duncan. You were willing to accept
what is happening? What?
Ideas and comments? George Lucas. As long as I could say no. I had to tell them, look, I'm going to reject...
The problem here, and I'm so dizzy and neck deep in this word salad mud topic that I probably don't even know what the fuck I'm saying. But part of the issue is George Lucas is not only the director, he's also the writer, the producer, and the executive producer. So in the end, he gets final say for a couple of reasons as the guy whose money is most tied to this, as the guy who's arranging the money, as the guy who has the artistic vision, and the guy who wrote this. It's not exactly a 1-for-1. It's not like, I don't know, Edgar Wright in the pre-production of Ant-Man. He's multiple pieces of that dynamic.
A lot of the things you give me, so just accept that as a given and don't worry about it. It's nothing personal, I'm trying to think of the overall movie. There are things about this that I know that you won't know. I'll be making decisions that seem arbitrary, but when it's done, it'll make sense. We did that, and they were good about it.
You have disappointments when your thing doesn't get picked or whatever, but there's always a really good reason for your image not being picked, and it could be something.
The problem with using these videos and things, these are sequences that are part of like the official, behind the scenes stuff. People act differently in front of a camera than they do if it was just this, two people hanging out, being as completely honest and candid as possible. So you got to discount some of the fact that they realize that this is officially marketed stuff. I'm just dizzy.
Something as basic as, this is great. George says this all the time. This is great, not for my movie, but this is great. It just doesn't fit into the story that we're telling.
We would go through various designs. I mean, this would go over a period of months while I was writing the script. So I would rewrite the script as I was beginning to see the environment and what I had to work with to design the sequence.
Eric Taymans. I would like to underscore the sense of freedom we had to come up with ideas. George was giving us brand new ideas. We were
That's another reference to another movie that shot. Just don't know if that...
doing a variation on an old theme, but new planets, new buildings, and that was neat. Doug Chang. It's very collaborative. George has exquisite taste in foreign language, and it's surprising how quickly he can read an idea and see if it conveys the personality and works for the story that he wants to tell. In the art reviews, he'll pick out certain things that he likes, like the eyes, the head, or the ribcage. Then it was
yeah, these clips of the artists aren't any more objective than the clips of Mike's friends at the start of the video. This is great, just not for my movie. Actually, a cool thing for a super successful filmmaker to tell you.
my job to take those elements and make the design structurally sound. Paul Duncan. Did you have context for the story and the environments they were to be seen in? Doug Chang. Not yet.
That's
it wasn't
hard.
until a year and a half afterward that George started to share how the story all fitted together.
Wouldn't that be a bad form of communication?
Designing in its purest form where we were coming up with elements that weren't preconceived ideas. It was empowering for me because I wasn't there just to illustrate his ideas, but I was contributing my own ideas.
Shouldn't a master creator, a master world builder be able to tell you what it is that he's envisioning and not adapt from what it is you're doing, especially considering they were using mostly green screen stuff? I don't know if that...
George will typically pick up a pencil or a pen and go and add his modifications to the designs, or say, let's take the cockpit of this drawing here and put it onto here. When I initially designed the ship into a single fighter, there was really not any logical place to put a R2 unit. So this is the little R2 unit, and he actually can fit in there with a little bit of cheating.
Okay.
But he can't get in from the bottom, so is it okay if he drops in from the top?
Drop in from the top.
And will we see him do that, or no? Okay. Good.
Cheating. Another filmmaking term. You cheat it visually because you don't expect someone to present a 2-hour thesis on why the thing doesn't work.
Just be there.
Just a detail.
And because Lucas was actually a good director who knew what he was doing and how to work with others, his team in turn enjoyed working with him and the atmosphere he cultivated. Ryan Church. He was pushing us to go further. I had bigger ideas in my head, and now they're not limited by anything. He is the best boss I ever had. He completely spoiled me. The myth that Lucas surrounded himself with slavishly obedient yes-men affects...
The word slavishly? I don't recall hearing that word.
How people perceive members of his team as well. After Lucas himself, the next most frequent target of ridicule is Rick McCallum. Stoklasa pulls...
What is it with Ricks?
This quote from Gary.
I think one of the problems is the fact that Lucas doesn't have more people around him who really challenge him. Gary Kurtz.
Positing that McCallum somehow failed as the prequel trilogy's producer due to not challenging Lucas enough. But as the quotes we heard earlier prove, McCallum just knew what his job was and was good at doing it. By the time Lucas started writing the prequels, McCallum had already served as producer on the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. Lucas had used this show as a vehicle to test out many of the visual effects he would develop in the prequels.
On the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, which was shot on 16mm by the way, George was already tampering with digital additions, digital extensions, and replication. That series was really the test of digital technology.
And McCallum's ability to make this production happen on a TV budget likely helped him earn the responsibility of producing the prequels. When reflecting on his experience on the show, lead actor Sean Flannery said, "Rick assembled the entire team top to bottom. He was part of the decision-making and everything. That guy is the producer's producer."
What are we talking about? What is this? How is this relevant to Plinkett at this point?
There is nothing on a movie set that guy does not know. Stoklasa and his ilk are obsessed with this clip of McCallum saying,
"It's so dense, every single image has so many things going on."
Is he obsessed?
Fuck you, Rick Berman.
And just gloss over the footage of him.
What is it with Ricks?
Getting the production back on track after a sandstorm ravaged their sets in Tunisia.
We have a charter plane and we are leaving, and that fucking charter plane, nothing's going to stop us. And if we have to work on our rest day, we're going to have to work on the rest day. Because I don't want them on any level pimping out on us.
George was totally calm about the storm. The same thing had happened to him on the first Star Wars film.
I say it's good luck.
It is good luck.
It happened last time, and it happened this time. Almost, it's like reliving it.
Luckily, we had this one set.
What does Giga Chad mean? I'm not down with this lingo.
That we could still continue to shoot on. Pushing the pod race to the very end of the schedule. We never lost a beat after that, and we walked out of Tunisia the
I don't recall seeing this in the Plinkett videos.
exact day that we were supposed to.
These people would have you believe that instead of taking charge alongside Lucas to recover from a problem of that scale, McCallum should have instead wasted everyone's time arguing with Lucas about how the camera wasn't spinning around.
Thank you for clearing that up, Jacob. A Chad, but more. Why not a Terra Chad then?
Enough, or that the Senate scenes were boring or something. But then again, shouldn't he have? After all, that is what made Gary Kurtz such a great producer for the original trilogy, right? Oh, looks like he wasn't the producer for all three of them. But still, A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, he still did a bang-up job producing those two films, right?
Oh, I don't think so.
The clashes between Kurtz and Lucas are known among most fans who have a passing familiarity with Star Wars history. However, the real reasons behind why such clashes developed and how early they started developing is still lost on some, thanks in part to interviews Kurtz himself did during the height of the backlash against the prequels.
So this is all because of the Rick McCallum references in the Red Letter Media videos? Because I hate to say this, but I feel like you're a little too close to the material, and whatever the reason is that you feel the need to defend everyone involved with the prequel trilogy, it comes off a little odd.
Skywalking by Dale Pollock. George trusted Kurtz to take care of the questions that distract the director, and Kurtz was happy to stay in the background. He did his job, I did my job, and we sort of complemented each other that way, Lucas says. A Kurtz summary of a 12-year relationship.
The Life and Films of George Lucas by Dale Pollock.
Kurtz also didn't instruct Lucas on how to make the movie. George didn't like people who told him what to do or how to do it.
But I thought he was very collaborative.
During the production of the first Star Wars, the stress of the tight schedule and limited resources, as well as the general lack of confidence in Lucas's vision on the...
It's almost like him acting all cool was maybe because there was a camera in his face.
Part of the English crew caused relations to become strained between Lucas and some important members of his team, including the DP, Gilbert Taylor. Lucas had originally brought Taylor on because he enjoyed the documentary style that Taylor had brought to A Hard Day's Night and Dr. Strangelove, and while Taylor did some amazing and innovative stuff for the in-camera effects on the film, Lucas felt Taylor wasn't providing the style he was asking for. Spielberg recalls, he didn't like the lighting, he didn't like what his cameraman Gil Taylor had done for him, he was really upset. Lucas had wanted Taylor removed from the production as he became more displeased by these problems. He left the final decision up to Kurtz, but Kurtz was too indecisive and timid to actually make that.
part of we're talking about the original Star Wars film now. It was said by a lot of people that the production of that was just hell. And I think that's part of the, I don't know, mystique of the movie at how impressive the finished product ended up being, even though they were really going through it in the production process.
Decision. Maybe Gil Taylor should have been fired, but neither Lucas nor Kurtz was willing to do it. Gary disliked confrontations too, and was convinced that if Taylor was let go, the entire crew might walk off the set. These experiences continued to weigh on Lucas as he reassembled his team for Empire. The only question was whether to rehire Gary Kurtz as producer. Lucas had not forgotten the tensions on Star Wars, which he felt were exacerbated by Kurtz's indecisiveness, particularly his handling of Gil Taylor. But Kurtz wanted to produce Empire, and in spite of his own reservations and the advice of those closest to him, Lucas relented. I suspected there would be problems, and I knew I was asking for trouble, Lucas now says. But he felt he owed Kurtz a second chance. I must underscore here that Lucas was going against his own judgment by bringing Kurtz back on. Perhaps the fallout from acquiescing to this informed Lucas's later pattern of staying true to his...
What does this have to do with Rick McCallum?
Own instincts. Kurtz proved to be such a fantastic producer on Empire that director Irvin Kershner doesn't even remember having a single meaningful interaction with him. I didn't really work with Gary that much, says Kershner. I worked with the production people mostly, and he was back there working with them, I guess. I didn't think of Gary as an...
That's a better question. What does this have to do with anything? I've literally forgotten what the topic is, what part of the thesis this portion is. Thanks for going through the frustration on stream with us. You're a real Petrochet.
Actual part of the production manager team. By all accounts, the production...
I would hate to tell you what the dollar amount was for this now 2 hours of work.
Of Empire went off the rails, largely because of Kurtz's mismanagement. Kershner would take far too long to make decisions on set.
I'm sorry, if you're saying that Empire Strikes Back going off the rails is something that needs to be highlighted, I really hope to have something go off the rails like that some point, because the reward is really worth all of the fuss.
And Kurtz wasn't willing to speak up enough to keep the production on track. And guess who else thought Kurtz was too much of a yes man? Guess who else thought that the producer didn't say no to the director enough? George Lucas. Lucas was irritated more at Kurtz for not restraining Kershner. That was the producer's job. Kurtz thought it was more important to make Kershner feel comfortable. The director needs to do what he needs to do, that's all, Kurtz says with a shrug. Lucas saw it another way. Gary never said no to anything. You may find it intellectually useful to keep this in mind next time you see this quote from Gary Kurtz.
I think one of the problems is the fact that Lucas doesn't have more people around him who really challenge him. The thing that he was restricted in the first Star Wars at the very least, and far less so in the prequels at least. There is something you'd like to be checked for the sake of quality. You'd want someone to give you notes and be like, hey, it's not really working, and here's a reason why. Because all of your names are associated with it, and if you are in charge from an executive producer, director, and writer perspective, it's really going to come down to you more than anything. So why not, for the sake of having a good product, hear people out? This is why I don't like the Hollywood be polite just because you want to be nice thing. It is work after all, but holy shit, I stepped away for 10 minutes. Is this dude reading us the whole book? I think there's multiple books, to be honest with you.
It's claiming that George Lucas didn't surround himself enough with people who would challenge him.
Ironic.
Things only got back on track after Lucas went to the London set to take charge of filming. He spent about a third of the shooting schedule supervising Kershner, and that's in addition to writing the story and being in charge of both pre-production and post-production. And when reflecting on his experience on the film, Kershner said that George was the best producer he ever worked with. Kershner had no such praise to offer for Gary Kurtz.
We submerged the plane 3/4 and made out of plywood. Now, action. We raised the plane, and as it came out of the water, the wings fell off because they were full of water. And I said, all right, how long will it take to fix it? We can do.
Very good point, Jacob. It's telling that Empire, the movie Lucas is on record as saying he didn't like, is the best Star Wars film. Yes. Objectively so. Statistics prove it.
Do it in an hour. Fix it. And I went and had coffee with George. Now, the usual producer would have pulled one of his two hairs out of his head. That's the usual, but not George.
Now, there's an important distinction that we need to make here when we talk about a producer saying no to a director. When McCallum acknowledges,
"My sole function in life is to make what George wants physically happen,"
that's what made him good at his job, because his responsibility as the producer was to ensure a smooth production so that Lucas could accomplish what he wanted. What he's referring to when he mentions the times he said we can't do that are the situations where they don't have the time or resources to do what Lucas is asking for. When Kurtz mishandled the conflicts with Gil Taylor, when he let the production of Empire run millions of dollars over budget and weeks behind schedule, and when he, by his own admission, never spoke up against Kirshner, that's what made him bad at his job, because his responsibility as the producer was to ensure a smooth production so that Lucas and Kirshner could accomplish what Lucas wanted.
Are we trying to say that producers that are essentially arms of the studios or producers are better for it? The dynamic is very different for George Lucas, most importantly, from probably the first Star Wars to Empire and Return, and then definitely for the prequels. His power position was way different. Where the first time when he made Episode 4, it was really kind of Fox being like, we're not spending any more money on this weird project of yours. I genuinely am confused as to what this has to do. So this is all because of the Rick McCallum piece in the Plinkett video.
So the reason why videos from people like Mike Stoklasa, Chris Stuckman, The Cosmonaut, The Unusual Suspect, Hello Greedo, Rocket Jump, and Jesse Gender are terrible is not just because their opinions on the prequels are negative, or even that they reveal a lack of understanding about how Star Wars works at the most basic levels.
What about how film works? How storytelling works?
It's that they deliberately and knowingly lie about how these films were made and who made them.
For 20 years, everyone kissed his ass and said, "You're the greatest, George. You created Star Wars. You created Star Wars." And secretly, deep down inside, he knows he really didn't do all that much. He started the ball rolling, and the actors made it work, the editors made it work, the art department, made it work. And he had the ideas, and then they're like, you created everything. I think the prequels.
So you just showed a clip however many minutes ago where the art department didn't have notes from George Lucas. They would draw something, and then he would add to it. So you've proven this statement prior to showing it.
Do kind of prove that his ultimate decision-making process is horribly flawed.
They claim to understand a work of art better than the artist who brought it into existence in the
kettle pot
first place.
Also, Lucas is notorious for not being an actor's director.
I will not betray the Republic.
Uses footage of Lucas connecting with his actors to prove that Lucas couldn't connect with his actors. I don't know if that's connecting so much as showing what he wants the actor to do. I don't know if that's connection so much as it's running lines.
My loyalties, so that you're turning on, but it's...
They wallow in the ignorance of not knowing what they're talking about and not wanting to learn.
I just don't understand that, but that's me.
I cannot even wrap my mind around it.
They pride themselves on being experts on cinema and don't even know how a camera works.
Explain.
This is the kind of internet.
How does a camera work? Who claim to be experts on cinema yet couldn't explain the how a camera works. I don't recall that coming up. I don't know, like these shots that are being referenced. Granted, I'm not the smartest man. Life is like a box of chocolates, but this is difficult for me to keep track of.
Film criticism that has defined generations, and all you had to do to argue your thesis was tell bald-faced lies about one of cinema's most important artists while cosplaying as him.
I don't know, satire isn't bald-faced lies. The perspective here is just as cringy in the opposite direction. Like you're I'm going to say the word again. You're not really covering this from an objective perspective. It's more, no, it's not. This is what he really did. And here's what is supposed to be impressive direction. Grace says he gave a poor line reading that is objectively connecting with the actor. I'm trying. See, that's a problem. I'm seeing the word objective in the chat.
If these people cling so tightly to the belief that all great art, all of it, comes from the collision of several people's incompatible ideas, and that it's always a net positive when one artist's vision is compromised, I hope they never learn about Satoshi Kon, or Stanley Kubrick, or Terrence Malick, Hayao Miyazaki, Tom Moore, Bill Watterson, Arthur Sullivan, or really just about anyone whose art is outside the purview of children's adventure.
Uses a reference of Kurosawa, which itself is referenced in Star Wars.
Films brought to you by Disney. But me personally, I think it's well past time that we give George Lucas the respect he's earned. And thankfully,
I'm sorry, is that what this is? Do we think that George Lucas didn't have the respect? You can respect someone and still criticize their work. That's silly.
Not alone in that belief. For anyone who has stuck around to the end of this video, first of all, thank you for hearing me out.
Yeah.
And second, if you seek works that actually display an appreciation for Lucas and at least attempt to understand his films, here's a couple recommendations. Rick Worley's How to Watch Star Wars series is sublime. He has two main parts, one on the storytelling of the prequels and another on the special editions, as well as a video discussing the importance of...
Should a regular old movie that gets released to regular old theaters have a guidebook on how to watch them? Wouldn't that be a bit of a problem for just a regular old audience?
Midichlorians and the Wills in Star Wars lore. I had always known that the Star Wars films all visually quote each other and quote other movies, but I didn't realize the full extent of how much they do until I watched Worley's videos, where he presents all the examples.
So the issue he had at the beginning of this with people referencing and using the Red Letter Media points as their own is now what he's saying about these videos.
He could find. I ripped off that idea from my Kingdom Hearts 358 Days video, by the way. Nerdonymous' video, How Star Wars was saved in the edit, is fantastic as well. It calls out every ridiculous lie that Rocket Jump makes in their video, and has an entire section that illuminates just how involved Lucas was in the editing of that first film. I especially like how he weaves in and out of passages from his sources to chronicle what the editing of A New Hope was actually like, and modeled this whole section focusing on George Lucas after that. The Romance of the Prequels is Good, actually, by Star Wars in 66 Seconds, is the strongest defense of the prequel's romantic storyline I've ever seen, finding all sorts of brilliant nuances in Hayden Christensen's and Natalie Portman's performances. These, as well as several other great Star Wars and George Lucas videos, are collected into a playlist I've linked in the description. Many of these videos also call out other problems with the Red Letter Media reviews, so don't consider this video the be-all end-all when it comes to debunking everything they say. Again, that was never my real main goal here.
Hope not.
These channels I mentioned also frequently reference J.W. Rinsler's Making of Star Wars books and Paul Duncan's The Star Wars Archives, so once you're done watching their videos, read those books as well. And get Paul Duncan's name right in your bibliography. Read Mike Klimo's Star Wars Ring Theory too. It'll open your eyes to the larger structure of how the Star Wars films connect with each other and what's really going on in the grand... At the mall food court, you'll know exactly what to do. Offer to buy him French fries.
Uh, so, in essence, hey, I'm over here. In essence, I I agree with the tiny pieces that this creator has an issue with, that people who claim to have issue with movies who use somebody else's voice to describe their own feelings. It's frustrating. It's unfortunate. It's essentially what anything on YouTube is at this juncture. But um, I would argue that making a video where you claim to disprove a very popular video while just kind of defending decisions and choices made in a movie that I would hope has some, or a series that has some very serious meaning to you, is fine. But instead of using negative to get your point across, I would say try to just positively speak about any media and watch how much traction that gets. The issue with being negative, especially on the internet, is people love to bully and shit on things. That's just the way it is. Is it unfortunate? Yes. Do I not like it as much as I do it sometimes? Yes. But it's just the way it is. If you're gonna make content here and do it for an audience, like I don't think the route being taken is sincere. I like, I get it. At least I hope I get it, that this person, it really sees more in the prequel trilogy and despises the I'm assuming that this person has had an argument with someone and had to dispute claims that they didn't feel like the person they were talking to really felt, but more just using pieces of the Plinkett video as, I don't know, uh, it undefeatable. What is it? A straw man? No, that's the opposite. What is the opposite of straw man? Steel man? You see, I don't use these terms. I tend to just avoid the debate bro shit. But that's part of my issue with content on the internet, is it's become this objective debate bro thing where it's more like, I'm going to prove my point, and because I have a thesis to back it up is what makes my point correct, or I'm more well versed and done more homework based on this thing. That's not what movie going. That's not what visual storytelling. That's not with cinema, kino. That's not what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to evoke emotion, depending on what type of movie you're watching. The emotion is different. Art is supposed to challenge you. Art is subjective. To watch something like the prequel trilogy and have the preface of the original trilogy, it's not very challenging, especially when you consider how well they did it, despite all of the hurdles that they had to overcome, only for all of those hurdles to kind of be pushed aside. And with no big studio or budgetary things clouding over them, they made this, and it's just not as good. And it's something of a letdown for people who have developed decades of a relationship with the Star Wars franchise. And if you don't agree with the Plinkett stuff, that's fine. I don't think they're lying. To dispute a fictional character that's created as an exaggeration of Stoklasa isn't really being generous or fair. because a lot of that is satire. Uh, to to complain about certain elements in the Plinkett video while using your own spin on those very same elements, I don't know. Is that bad faith? I don't know the lingo, but uh, I can understand someone being upset with. I don't know. There are a bunch of people that I speak to that uh, their reference point for why they hate the Last Jedi is some of the big hitters, or like a drinker video, or uh, every frame a pause, not every frame a painting. And to me, it's like, all right, they're very popular. They have an opinion that they've spoken at length about what their issue with that is. What is your issue with it? I don't want to hear recycled terminology that I can go find myself without having to speak to you, which is a chore in itself. I get that, but I don't think your gripe is with Red Letter Media. It's hard for me to receive this as someone who just isn't being extremely apologetic for George Lucas. I mean, you closed it with buy him some French fries. I'm sorry. He sold his shit to Disney for $4 billion. He should buy me French fries. Anybody who is this emotional about Star Wars certainly appreciates George Lucas. And I would say that because they're so invested, because they let themselves get so worked up, it says something to that universe that Lucas created. But it doesn't mean that it's this cult, this echo chamber of whatever you do, I will accept it. That's not the way things work. At least honestly, if you're going to use the word lie so many times in a video, at least be honest with yourself. I wouldn't say that. It's just I don't know, like it. It's like if there is a marathon going on and someone gets dropped in to the middle point, you have people that were running for 15 miles and you're all fresh. I feel like I'm the fresh guy in this marathon where the person who created this video, they've been running for the 15 miles and there's things going on that I have no reference point for. And I can understand that. I can appreciate it. I've been there. I saw you guys in the chat bring up Friday the 13th a couple of times. As I've gotten older, as I've gotten further away from the nostalgia of it all, I recognize, and I don't think I've ever said once that my favorite movie, never mind franchise, ever is Friday the 13th. Even though I'm a bit of a stan here. They mean something to me, but as far as quality of film, the artistic merit of the product, I know damn well it's not the best thing that I can see. I'm a fan of it. It's different. I would think that there's some growing up that needs to happen here. It's also a very good point. Friday the 13th is terrible. It's an awesome movie to watch. Right. We always have this food analogy. You can have a brilliant steak dinner that takes you hours to make, and it's brilliant and it tastes incredible, or you can get a Big Mac. And of course, the steak is better, but sometimes you just want to go to a drive-through window and eat a quick Big Mac, and you appreciate it more because you didn't have to cook for 3 hours and all of a sudden, like, the appreciation is different. It doesn't mean that it's not better. The thing about, I would say, movies more than music, well, maybe less so than games. There are art forms where some people just experience them to kill time or to satiate some emotion. And sometimes people just watch quality, and you'll see people's like top 10 list and you're like, I haven't heard of any of these. And yeah, if Star Wars is that important to someone, I would advise them to maybe not take everything so seriously and avoid the internet, especially YouTube content, because I don't know. I said it earlier. The last film that we had from Star Wars uh, is messy and abysmal. But judging these films based on the film themselves, if you were to just drop in on The Last Jedi, the movie is well made. I understand that's not a popular argument. The sequel trilogy is messy. It is so messy, so sloppy, so disjointed. But it seems like one of the bigger gripes that I've seen, I'm not saying that this person had that gripe, is see, the sequels suck. Now you can stop talking about the prequels. And I don't think that's an argument that certainly not Plinkett or Red Letter Media was presenting. It's something within the filmmaking itself that is missing, and it doesn't have the same luster that it did. And I don't know. From a technical aspect, I would still argue that the prequels are the least impressive of the three trilogies. But I don't know if the best way to get your point across is to counter in a negative fashion someone else's points while referencing books and hours and weeks worth of content to prove your point from a little 120-minute film. 6 out of 10 people, maybe more, they're not going to do that much homework for their little night out, especially kids. If it's for everyone and a kid is watching a movie about trade disputes and blockades, what kid is going to go read up on the intent and all of the things surrounding that production? It's not the same as what the original trilogy is. And that's really that. I guess I'll open it up to you guys in case something else comes up. Special thank you to the producers in my Patreon. I worked for less than $5 an hour here, guys. You you got your money's worth. PH says homework is why Marvel is having its problems. Right. Working backwards. There was a point where he brought up, like, he played a clip where Lucas basically said, I know where I need it to be at the end. And he was just like kind of spinning tires to get to the point that he was at. A visionary filmmaker would know what their beginning, middle, and end is and kind of fluff around the middle. Not, I have the ending. How do I get there? And something as weird as a 12-year-old being traumatized isn't as big a deal as a 9-year-old being traumatized. I think that's silly. You could have a 24-year-old who gets traumatized. That's a big deal. If you give us the emotion, if you visually give us, something to connect to, the age doesn't really matter. Trauma is trauma. I don't agree with that, like, at all. I don't know what 3 years, what difference that makes for a kid suffering trauma with his parent. Knowing the ending is for writing novels, not for writing screenplays. That's a very good point. Again, I brought it up earlier. Story, read that book, McKee. That's pretty on the nose. There are things that you start with intro conflict resolution. Again, it's like you said, it's not like writing a novel. You have your 3 pieces and you kind of fill out from there. And that is how it helps. It helps with your character building if you can figure out what their motivation is, which is also a big thing that the actors focus on. I am so dizzy. Adam says, I take Star Wars as a whole, the good with the bad. Each trilogy has their pros and their cons. I just personally enjoy all of it as a singular entity. Yeah, it's been a little. I tell you, I think I'm almost happy that the skeleton crew thing hasn't really been in the discussion, or at least it hasn't been suggested to me in my feed. So I've just been able to experience it and enjoy it as an old kid, and I've just been experiencing it and liking it. It can certainly fall off the deep end. Do I think it's the greatest thing ever? No, but I'm having a fun ride. If you give me a 10-hour video on why the first episode of Skeleton Crew is terrible, I'm not going to promise you I'll watch it. I'm going to charge way more than I did for this video, that's for sure. Um, I think part of the issue is all of the noise on the internet. For as much as Star Wars is supposed to be a thing that you enjoy and it means to you what it means to you, a lot of people are making content, myself included, evidently, and they're adopting their own opinions on things. And it's as much as people are claiming things about how they feel about their issues with the franchise, it's more like a watered down message that doesn't resemble what someone feels personally, and that's kind of unfortunate. Christian says the Christmas special is objectively the best. There we go. The word of the day is objectively. That's all that matters. Are you enjoying it? Yes, then that's all that should matter. Right. I agree. I agree a lot. But also at the same breath, giving praise to something on the internet, it doesn't work. You're not going to get popular that way. I would assume that this person did whatever their reasoning behind making a video where they kind of counteract the Plinkett video, which itself is a negative review, to seek or put praise on the filmmakers. Well, not really. I don't know. For as much as he said that there was lying and things, it was just showing videos of Lucas and explaining things that happened in the original trilogy, and I'm dizzy. I'm so dizzy. I would say that that's probably close to it. I don't know what happened where this guy felt the need, because he said years. He was thinking about this for years to make this content. Something. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that one of, if not all of these prequels mean something very special and very particular to him. And hearing gripes, I guess hearing stuff like that is some way of saying, no, my feelings are mine. I know that this is true to me. It doesn't mean that it's true to everyone else. And yeah, you can argue that in so many different directions. But your vibes showing videos of George Lucas and other producers and other things from other movies, it doesn't dispute the fact that there are issues with the prequels. That was an hour and change. And I would say at least half an hour of it was irrelevant stuff. I was really intrigued to hear what the argument with cinematography was, and to talk about a writer during that sequence is weird, especially considering Prometheus. You may not dig it, but I think it's quite well made, and the writing is deeper than the prequels, I would argue. But there's just, considering that there was supposed to be a tit for tat element, it just didn't come to fruition for me, and I don't understand this person's perspective as to why the Plinkett videos are not true and or lying, because they're technical assessments, and just countering with writer from a different film being tagged in a tweet or something. Uh, I have notes, but this video has only been out, what, not even 2 weeks yet. And one of my patrons has had access to it and wanted to hear my opinion on it. I checked. It would be like my third highest performing video on this channel. So the fuck do I know? I'm just dizzy and lost. No one can have different thoughts and feelings anymore. Everyone has to be in line with a side. Yeah. I would like fiction to be fiction again. I would like things to feel like they're indicative of the person who's presenting their claim, less so just regurgitating other people's thoughts and emotions. Where I feel like the Plinkett video did that. He created a character that was an exaggeration of his emotions. And when there was claims of things that weren't very accurate with common sense, it would veer into like comedy. Otherwise, why have the whole basement aspect? It's a guy who's not all there mentally. And to take such umbrage with those videos it's I don't know. There's something going on. I didn't mention Lost. I did an awesome on this video. I don't know if I did. I almost wish that I was taking notes. I thought this was a thing that this is what I get for not doing any homework. I thought this was a thing where it was going to be like, here's A, and then I would react to it or discuss with B. But this went on a journey that I'm sort of frustrated in myself that maybe I didn't. I don't know if I would have had time to soak up 90 minutes worth of a video to take notes and counteract. This was more a thing like, hey, have you seen this? And me seeing just how well it's doing, which congrats. I kind of jumped on board, and I'd like to know what is important where here, because there are portions where I got lost, and again, that's not very hard, but I would like to hear disputes about how Phantom Menace is an achievement in cinematography, because I didn't get that here. And I don't feel like anything was counteracting any of the complaints from the Red Letter Media videos. And that's kind of what I was looking for here. And I'm open. If you can tell me that within the original product, the 90, 120 minute film, without doing any other homework, reading, watching, 2 seasons of a show, if you can tell me why something works in that 120 minutes, I can acknowledge it. I could disagree with it or what, but I don't think any of that was presented here. And to claim that they're lies or dishonest, it's a funky word. Imagine his feelings towards critics of the prequels similar to my feelings towards people who bitch about the dream sequence and finale of The Sopranos. The difference is I don't need a book to explain Chase's creative decisions. Plus, I think the one benefit of a television series is you don't need to write novels. You have a long time to get your journey out there. I don't know. I feel bad for kids of the prequels, because maybe in today's day and age, it would be a long form series. And I don't know, it parallel to the original Star Wars. Within 2 minutes, visually, you have a very, very clear idea of what they're trying to tell you. I don't think that's the case. And just from Jump Street, that is a cinematography thing. I don't know if I'll process the whole Rick McCullum issue, but yeah, congrats to the person and their success. But I didn't entirely understand everything, and I don't feel like there was dispute presented as to why the Phantom Menace or Attack of the Clones or any of them, how any of them work in a technically proficient manner. And that is just me. Christian says movies should be show, don't tell, hence why Nefarious was a flop for me. That's it. If you love books, that's great. Film isn't that objectively. But people who watch movies and appreciate movies and criticize when a movie does or does not work, it's based on visuals more often than not. You have other creators that manage to transcend that category. People love Kevin Smith. I wouldn't say anything about Kevin Smith movies are visually stand out at all, but it happens. I don't know. I just wish the Star Wars universe would just calm down. Like this video is brand new, and we're talking about a 25-year-old movie. Yeah, and that's the issue. It required homework. That's it. I might have to raise my price tier or cap the amount of time that I do something like this, a per hour thing. But I appreciate you guys taking the ride with me. If you watch this in the future and you have something that you can cite, and it's less than 5 minutes, and it's some way disputing things from the Red Letter Media video or any gripe with the prequel trilogy, and it's visually there without notes and homework, I'll check it out. I don't know if I'll do it for an audience, but it's fascinating. It's fascinating what's happened to Star Wars. We've had now probably 4 generations of Star Wars audiences, and it seems like the original trilogy, everyone's kind of jealous of them in one way, shape, or form, and everyone else is just bickering at this point. Where there's good Star Wars stuff out there. Is it fantastic? Is it something that just blows over all of society? No. But does that always have to happen? I don't know. You take that back. Tusk and Yoga Hosers were visual marvels. They were visual. All right, gents. It's been a fond 3 hours. Man, I could have watched almost. I could have almost watched a full Lord of the Rings movie, but I didn't. Comment, do all that other fun stuff. Until next time. Why? What? What's happening? What happened?